It's extremely likely for Mingdong to be. Anyway, Mingdong's background is very powerful. If he can get the experts of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing to take action, they might be able to help my sister, Jianchen said in thought. This had to do with his sister's safety. As long as he could help his sister, he would do anything no matter what it was. Mingdong can use the authority of the Grand Exalt. The other Supreme God Kings might have no idea about his true identity, but Adriana and I know it clearly. If it were someone else who faced the same situation, Mingdong might be able to grant them protection through the power of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing with his identity and status. However, it won't work with our Ice Goddess Hall, said Shui Yunlan. Jianchen was surprised. Do you have past grievances? Shui Yunlan nodded. Very long ago, there was indeed some conflicts of interest between our Ice Goddess Hall and the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. It happened very long ago. So long ago that the 4 protectors did not even exist back then for our Ice Goddess Hall. I heard this from a conversation between the Ice Goddess and the Snow Goddess when I served them in the past. Moreover, I learnt from the Snow Goddess that Her Majesty once competed with the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing for a unique treasure, resulting in an intense battle. At that time, the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing's cultivation lacked slightly in comparison to the Snow Goddess, so she suffered defeat in the end. The First Majesty was restrained on an icy plain by the Snow Goddess, and only broke free 3 years later. Now the Snow Goddess still hasn't recovered her memories or cultivation. It's already extremely fortunate for us if the people from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing don't add insult to injury, so asking them for help is even more impossible. It looks like in the current situation, only Senior Mo Tianyan can assist my sister, Jianchen sighed gently. He also felt helpless as he secretly worried for his sister. Although he still had ties with Tai Ta and the God Clan, Shui Yunlan had fallen out with the greatest God King of the God Clan, Adriana, back on the Tianyuan continent. It was not a very plausible option for them to seek help from the God Clan. But I don't know how to find Mo Tianyan either, Jianchen stated his frustration. Shui Yunlan looked at Jianchen as the light in her eyes flickered. She said, "There's no need to find him. I think he'll come to look for you at a certain time. Your identity will be exposed very soon. Once the people from the Ice Goddess Hall receive news, my sister will be in constant danger. Since the only person who can help my sister is Senior Mo Tianyan now, we can't just sit and wait for Senior Mo Tianyan to come by himself. We better think of some ideas to find Mo Tianyan sooner. I'll go ask Rui Di and Ji Yi of the Sect of Dragons and Phoenixes, and see if they can help us or not," said Jianchen before turning around and leaving. He went to find Rui Di and Ji Yi to ask about the ancient winged tiger god. According to our seniors, after the winged tiger god brought our clansmen to the saints' world, he did not stick around for long and left. He rarely appeared after that. This is all we know about the winged tiger god. We know nothing else, said Rui Di. The light in Ji Ye's eyes flickered. She looked at Jianchen. Rui Di and I don't know much about the winged tiger god. If you want to learn more, you're welcome to visit our sect of dragons and phoenixes. Our seniors know more. Afterwards, Jianchen conversed some more with Rui Di and Ji Yi, obtaining the precise location of the sect of dragons and phoenixes from them. At the same time, he learnt of the reason why Shangguan Muri had come to the Neptunian Divine Palace this time. How much longer does the zither of the demonic cry need before its artifact spirit awakens? Jianchen looked at Shangguan Mu'er. The artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry had a direct correlation to Shangguan Mu'er's future, so he cared about this very much. There is indeed a mysterious power that can allow the artifact spirit to recover quickly on the 12th floor. The zither of the demonic cry already absorbed quite a lot of it on the 12th floor before, so it has recovered by quite a lot. Looking at it now, I probably need another half a month, and the artifact spirit should completely awaken, said Shangguan Mu'er. Her eyes shone with eagerness. A mysterious power that can allow the artifact spirit to recover. Jianchen murmured softly as if he was in thought. Excitement flickered through his eyes. Clearly, he was deeply interested in this mysterious power. The battle between the Supreme God Kings and the gigantic lizard probably still hasn't ended. Let's rest for a few more days before going up, Jianchen said to Shangguan Mu'er. Shangguan Mu'er nodded. She had no objections. Afterwards, Jianchen looked at Ming Dong, Adriana, Shui Yunlan, Rui Di, and Ji Yi. He said, "Everyone, I've agreed to help Xiao Man take back her ancestor's Neptunian divine palace, but there are still many obstacles in the future. As a result, I hope you can assist me. Once the matter is completed, you will have my deep gratitude." Jianchen, don't be so polite between the two of us. Your matters are also mine. If you need my strength, you just need to tell me. Ming Dong laughed aloud and agreed straightforwardly. I can help you out. Anything extra will allow Her Majesty to become more powerful. Shui Yunlan also agreed. I've come under orders, so I naturally can't let you fall in danger. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it to the war god. Adriana smiled faintly. Rui Di and Ji Yi looked at each other. Afterwards, Rui Di said, Ji Yi and I can also help you out, seeing how we're from the same homeland. However, our sect of Dragon and Phoenixes would like 30% of all the legacies from chaotic and infinite primes you get from Xiao Man. Although our sect of Dragon and Phoenixes has been developing rapidly, we've only been around for 1,000,000 years. Our heritage pales in comparison to many other organizations, so we're in urgent need of various cultivation methods and battle skills that can be used to recruit people. We won't take a single portion of the cultivation resources at all, Ji Yi added. Alright, that's no problem. Once Xiao Man gains control over the Neptunian Divine Palace, I'll give you 30% of all the Primordial Realm legacies. Jianchen agreed without any hesitation. Jianchen, I'll leave these people to you, Shui Yunlan said suddenly. With a wave of her hand, the group of people who she had frozen up were led out from a divine hall. These people were the god kings who followed the fifth prince, as well as Mr. Shu, who wielded a god artifact. Yun Xian, Yun Lianqing, and the other god kings of the Yun family were also among them. However, every single one of them had become an ice statue. Shui Yunlan took action and melted the frost effortlessly, releasing their seal. Now that the seal was released, the people of the Yun family and the god kings of the fifth prince regained their freedom. However, when they saw Shui Yunlan, who radiated with a cold presence and had remained encased in silver-white armor the entire time, their faces suddenly changed and became filled with surprise and fear. Although our fifth prince hasn't obtained the complete legacy of the Grand Prime, he has obtained a space ring. The space ring must contain unimaginable wealth, so please help the fifth prince. As long as the fifth prince is alive, all the cultivation resources in the space ring will belong to you. Mr. Shu pleaded to Shui Yunlan. Naturally, they had no idea what had happened after Shui Yunlan froze them. Hee, you're still thinking about your fifth prince. Unfortunately, he's already dead. He died to my hands. Jianchen, who stood to one side, sneered at Mr. Shu. Chapter 2152. Debts resolved. Mr. Shu and so on had just been let out of Shui Yunlan's divine hall. They had just been freed. Naturally, the first person they saw was Shui Yunlan. Due to their fright, they explained to Shui Yunlan as quickly as they could before they could even notice the surrounding situation. They had personally witnessed Shui Yunlan's strength on the 12th floor. They were afraid that the fifth prince's flight during the chaos would make Shui Yunlan misunderstand, which would lead to their deaths. As a result, they failed to discover Jianchen. Only when Jianchen's voice rang out did Mr. Shu and the others discover in surprise that the Jianchen that they loathed was also here. Jianchen, why are you here? Mr. Shu's expression changed slightly. After crying out, his gaze immediately sharpened. Intense killing intent poured out without the slightest effort of concealing it. Jianchen, you've ruined the fifth prince's matters and prevented the fifth prince from gaining the Grand Prime's legacy. Our Sky Empire will never spare you, Mr. Shu said through gritted teeth. The fifth prince, who was supposed to obtain the Grand Prime's legacy and rise up, had been smacked from heaven to hell by Jianchen, which filled Mr. Shu with hatred. Not only had Jianchen ruined the fifth prince's future prospects, but he had also destroyed the hopes of the Sky Empire becoming an everlasting empire, as well as Mr. Shu's future. As a result, Mr. Shu treated Jianchen as his greatest enemy. Brother Jianchen, are you really still alive? Yun Lianqing stared at Jianchen in surprise and delight from behind Mr. Shu. The eyes of the young lady of the Yun family who stood beside Yun Lianqing, Yun Xian, also flickered with light. She stared directly at Jianchen. Although she did not say anything, her face was also filled with evident delight. Jianchen smiled and nodded at Yin Lianqing and Yin Xian. However, he did not greet the two of them. He looked at Mr. Shu and said indifferently, "There are plenty of great organizations and clans in the Saints' world that I've offended in here. Your Sky Empire is only an eternal empire. You're just a puny existence compared to those peak clans. Do you think I'd be afraid?" Mr. Shu's face sank. When he saw Jianchen's fearless expression, he understood that Jianchen really did not take the Sky Empire seriously. Afterwards, he looked at Shui Yunlan with an ugly expression. "May I ask how you are related to Jianchen?" Mr. Shu had gradually calmed down. He slowly scanned the surroundings and saw all the people gathered around. Mr. Shu did not recognize Ruidi and Ji Yi. But when he saw Mingdong, who sat on the floor as he recovered, his heart immediately sank. "Jianchen, I'll leave these people to you," Shui Yunlan said with her usual, icy tone. With that, she turned around and left, without paying any attention to Mr. Shu and so on. Mr. Shu and the remaining guards instantly paled. They could tell from her words that the terrifyingly powerful Supreme God King with the powers of ice was on the same side as Jianchen. "Excuse me. If I've seen correctly, you should have grievances with that other person. May I ask just what benefits Jianchen has promised you such that the two of you set this grievance aside temporarily, and are working with him? If you are willing to assist us, I believe we can also give you what Jianchen has offered," Mr. Shu said to Adriana as a final ray of hope shone in his eyes. Adriana was not cold like Shui Yunlan. She looked at Mr. Shu and the others with sympathy and said, "Jianchen is the friend of the esteemed war god of our god clan. I've come under the war god's orders to assist Jianchen. You were wrong from the beginning when you chose to become enemies with Jianchen." "What? The god clan, friend of the war god?" Mr. Shu was stunned as he stared at Adriana blankly. Bitterness filled him. Only at that moment did he finally realize just how stupid of a decision it was to become enemies with Jianchen. The matter has already developed to this point. "It's useless even if you have regrets," Jianchen said coldly. He held the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, which shone with starlight, swinging it towards them mercilessly. At that moment, Mr. Shu and the remaining guards of the 5th prince were all slain. Only the few people of the Yun family remained. The people of the Yun family looked at the corpses, and they seemed to become absent-minded. All of them could still clearly remember how Jianchen, Kaya, and Chanlong were loathed when they first boarded the Yun family spaceship, especially when they learnt that the three of them had taken up 3 of the Yun family's spots for the entry to the Neptunian Divine Palace. Back then, most of them became displeased. At that time, none of them took Jianchen and Kaya seriously, as they were only overgods. However, none of them had ever thought that the Jianchen they looked down on before would create such an astonishing disturbance in the Neptunian Divine Palace, where even the 5th prince and Mr. Shu, who were powerful enough to make them suffocate, ended up dying to Jianchen's hands. All the remaining god kings of the Yun family were amazed as they looked at Jianchen as he wielded the 9-star sword of heavenly ways right now. "Brother Lianqing, the Neptunian Divine Palace hasn't been very peaceful. It's better for you to leave sooner," Jianchen said to Yun Lianqing. The only person he knew out of all the god kings of the Yun family was Yun Lianqing. Yun Lianqing looked at Jianchen with extremely mixed feelings. He said, "The appearance of the Neptunian moon has made the Neptunian Divine Palace into a world of those supreme god kings. In reality, our Yun family wanted to leave the Neptunian Divine Palace long ago, if it had not been for the 5th prince. Now that the 5th prince no longer restricts us, we will naturally be leaving soon. Brother Jianchen, we will be leaving first. Farewell." With that, Yun Lianqing left with the god kings of the Yun family. Yun Xian walked at the very back. When she brushed past Jianchen, she halted slightly and looked at him with mixed feelings. She said softly, "Thank you for assisting me. I will never forget about the kindness you have shown. I just hope that you can forgive me for my mistakes in the past." Yun Xian and Yun Lianqing departed. They left this place, the Neptunian Divine Palace, together, ending their trip in the Neptunian Divine Palace prematurely. "What's your relationship with her?" Shengguan Mu'er stared right at Jianchen as if she was interrogating him. It's nothing complicated. We were just working with the Yun family. Jianchen remained indifferent and roughly explained his deal with the Yun family. Adriana, I found this in the fifth prince's space ring. It's filled with a churning presence of life. I was wondering if this would be useful to you. At this moment, Jianchen took out a green bead that was the size of a peach pit. As soon as the bead appeared, a dense life force permeated the surroundings. Just a breath of it would be enough for people to experience an illusion that their vitality was growing. Adriana's eyes lit up, and she said, "That's a life star core. I helped out the fifth prince before because they were willing to give me a life star core for my efforts. I never thought it would be different from what they said, where the life star core was supposed to be in their empire. Instead, the fifth prince carried it with him." Chapter 2153. The person behind it all. 1. A few days later, Jianchen and the others tidied themselves up and set off once again. They headed off towards the 12th floor. Very soon, they arrived on the 7th floor. They slowed down at this moment, and they all became cautious. Even the most powerful of the group, Shui Yunlan and Adriana, did not dare to be careless. A few days have passed. I wonder what's the outcome of the battle between the Supreme God Kings and the Lizard. Jianchen stopped sternly several 100,000 kilometers away from the entrance to the 8th floor. He stared ahead with some worry. The senses of his soul shot out and flooded the region ahead of him rapidly, enveloping a range of 1,000,000 kilometers instantly. "Wait here. I'll go check on the situation up ahead," Jianchen said to everyone. With that, he shot off with lightning speed, vanishing from before everyone. He traveled tens of thousand kilometers in a matter of seconds. Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Rui Di Jiyi, Shangguan Mu'er, Mingdong and so on all remained where they were subconsciously. They gazed in Jianchen's direction from high up in the sky as the senses of their souls appeared, surging ahead to observe what was happening there. Clearly, they all knew that Jianchen had drawn out an extremely terrifying lizard from the lava on the 8th floor. Against a lizard that had reached late infinite prime, even the Supreme God Kings who ranked high up on the God King's throne did not have confidence in dealing with it. As a result, they were all extremely vigilant. There are people near the entrance, and there's quite a few of them. Let's go up and have a look as well. Adriana dispersed the senses of her soul, and said to the people beside her. Afterwards, they all flew in the direction that Jianchen had left in. Over 20 God Kings sat scattered around the entrance to the 8th floor. All of them were pale and haggard. Their clothes were tattered, and even the supreme quality Saint Artifacts armor of some Supreme God Kings had been damaged or destroyed, revealing their skin that had been charred black. Clearly, all of them were heavily injured. Half of them only had half of their lives left. There were even a handful of people who seemed like they were at the gates of death, where their life force dimmed. Many of them were missing limbs. It was also because of the severity of their injuries that many of them were powerless to keep moving. They did not even have the energy to find an obscure place to heal. They could only scatter themselves at the entrance, maintaining a certain distance from one another as they healed through high-grade pills. Suddenly, a streak of light shot through the air like a comet. It covered a great distance in a split second, and immediately arrived near the entrance to the 8th floor. It turned into a young man with a striking appearance. The arrival of this person alarmed the healing God Kings. When they opened their eyes and saw who it was, all of their faces changed. Fury filled their eyes. Clearly, they hated this person to their bones. "Jianchen, how dare you come here? Jianchen, you sly, despicable man. You've caused the deaths of hundreds of Supreme God Kings. You deserve a horrible death. You need to pay a heavy price for your actions. There is no longer anywhere safe for you in the Saints' world." Half of the God Kings there bellowed out. They all gritted their teeth. They hated Jianchen from the bottom of their heart. The other half stared at Jianchen closely. They were cautious, ready to flee at any time. Jianchen snorted coldly in response to the furious curses. He said sternly, "In order to hunt me down, hundreds of Supreme God Kings went as far as to chase me from the 12th floor to the 5th floor before going back to the 8th floor. May I ask if I've ever offended you? Have I ever provoked you? Are only you lot allowed to hunt me down while I'm not supposed to do anything in retaliation? If you had just handed over the girl in a straightforward manner, Would there be anyone who would continue making things difficult for you? You brought this all on yourself, said a supreme god king. Even though he was very injured, his gaze was still ice-cold. I brought this all on myself? Ha ha ha. Then can't I say you brought this all on yourselves as well? If you hadn't forced me like this, and if you hadn't tried to hunt me down mercilessly, how would you have ended up like this? Jianchen gradually drew closer as he said that. His face was cold, and his eyes slowly shone with intense killing intent. He said frigidly, "If I lost, I would have probably been reduced to a cold corpse long ago. Unfortunately, from the looks of things, I'm not the one who lost. Instead, you lost. As a result, the people who should become corpses are you lot." Jianchen held the 9-star sword of heavenly ways in his hand. It shone with faint starlight. As the might of the god artifact was gradually unleashed, the light shone brighter and brighter, just like a star. All the supreme god kings before him were heavily injured. Clearly, they were in no shape to retaliate. Jianchen was ready to kill them. "Jianchen, they can't pose a threat to you anymore, so just let them go. Don't kill them all off." At this moment, Adriana's voice rang out from behind. She, Shui Yunlan, and the others had caught up from behind. "If you let them go, the news about Her Majesty will definitely be revealed even faster. Kill them all," Shui Yunlan said coldly. Adriana stared at Shui Yunlan furiously and said, "There must have been quite a lot of people who left the Neptunian Divine Palace in the past few days. It's impossible to hide everything that happened in here from the outsiders. Your existence has probably already reached the outside. Killing them would be useless." Adriana paused before glancing past the supreme god kings. "And I'm certain that even if you try to kill them, you can't get all of them. As long as one of them escapes, the deaths of the others will be learnt by their various clans and organizations. Major clans and organizations all stand behind these people. They might even be famed, peak organizations in the saints' world. If the people behind them learn that the supreme prodigies they nurtured with so much effort died to your hands, they'll never spare you. The entire saints' world might end up hunting you down. Many god kings have already died on the 8th floor to that lizard. Their deaths are directly related to me, so the organizations behind them will definitely come looking for me. I've already offended so many major organizations, so it won't hurt to offend a few more," said Jianchen. "That's different." Adriana shook her head gently. "Although the deaths of those people are related to you, you still didn't kill them personally. Moreover, the fact that the Neptunian Divine Palace has been hiding such a powerful lizard in the lava has taken everyone by surprise. They weren't expecting it. As a result, as long as our god clan intervenes in this matter and speaks up for you, they might not look into it anymore. If the people from the heavenly palace of Bisheng are willing to step forward as well, it would be even better." Chapter 2154. The person behind it all too. Since these people have taken part in the fight for the Neptunian Divine Palace, there will definitely be injuries and deaths. Survival of the fittest, where the weak get preyed on, is the unchanging law of this world. If we spare these people because their backgrounds and origins are too powerful, wouldn't it mean I'd have to avoid them like the plague when I see them in the future? If the organizations behind these people offend me and target me, am I supposed to just endure it and let them off time and time again? Are they allowed to hunt me down fearlessly because they have an impressive background, while the me without a background can't kill them? Jianchen argued coldly. His face gradually became ugly as he watched Adriana block him. Although Adriana was not as powerful as Shui Yunlan, she was far more powerful than him. If she insisted on stopping him, killing the people before him would not be easy. "Jianchen, I'm doing this because I'm thinking for you. Even if you don't plan on considering things for yourself, you need to consider things for the people behind you. If you really offend the organizations behind them too much, they'll probably look into your origins and exact revenge on the people behind you. I also know that your brother Mingdong is from the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Mingdong will definitely stand by your side and protect the people behind you, preventing those major organizations from acting up openly. But what about under the table?" Adriana persuaded sincerely. She did not wish to see these powerless supreme god kings die to Jianchen's hands. Petty kindness, Shui Yunlan said coldly from one side. Her heart was just as cold. She seemed completely emotionless. She was a cold-blooded person. Jianchen sank into his thoughts after listening to Adriana's explanation. The light in his eyes flickered as he also hesitated for a moment. He thought about the Tianyuan clan in the southern region of the distant Cloud Plain. Basically, all the people who had come with him to the Saints' world in the past had settled down in the Tianyuan clan. If the Tianyuan clan really faced a disaster because of him, he would probably never be able to forgive himself. Alright then. For the sake of Adriana, I'll spare you lot this time. Jianchen still listened to Adriana's suggestion after a while of thought. The injured Supreme God Kings were all relieved when they heard that. They had suffered heavy wounds during the battle against the gigantic lizard. Half of them had even lost the ability to flee. They would definitely be dead if Jianchen wanted to kill them for real. Although the other half still had some energy to use forbidden techniques to escape, they would have to pay an incredible price. They really did not want to use a self-mutilating method of escape unless they had to. As a result, everyone was relieved when they heard that Jianchen would not be killing them. At this moment, Jianchen's eyes suddenly narrowed. He glanced past them coldly and said seriously, "Of course, I'm only sparing you this one time. If you become my enemy again in the Neptunian Divine Palace, don't blame me for being merciless." Jianchen snorted coldly before making his way onto the 8th floor. After Jianchen left, the pale-faced and haggard Mingdong also glanced at the Supreme God Kings in a threatening manner. He sniggered. "Did you hear my brother's words? If you continue to oppose my brother, it won't just be grievances with Jianchen. You'll also become an enemy of me. I know you all come from major organizations and clans, and you have very powerful backgrounds. If the organizations behind you are bold enough to make trouble for my brother, I, Mingdong, swear on my life that I will use the power of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing and make the organizations pay a heavy price." After throwing that out there, Mingdong left with the 5 divine generals behind him, following Jianchen to the 8th floor. The expressions of the Supreme God Kings all changed when they heard Mingdong's threat. All of them feared the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. Even if the Anata Grand Prime who watched over the organization was dead, the Heavenly Palace of Bishing was still in existence that stood at the apex of the Saints' world. This matter ends here. I can save you once, but not a second time. Jianchen is the friend of our esteemed war god. I've said everything now. You're on your own now. Adriana gazed at the injured Supreme God Kings with mixed feelings and showed sympathy. Among the volcanoes on the 8th floor, Jianchen stood with the damaged Anata Tower in his hand. He hovered in the sky as he observed the surroundings cautiously. The senses of his soul swept out as he observed the surroundings time and time again. He was ready to enter the Anata Tower at any time. The gigantic lizard is not outside. I wonder what happened during its battle with the Supreme God Kings. Has it returned to the depths of the lava? Or has it left this floor to hunt down the other Supreme God Kings? Jianchen wondered. Several days had already passed now, and the 8th floor had recovered its peace. Only the vast expanse of heavily damaged volcanoes depicted the intense battle that happened on the floor earlier. At this moment, Adriana appeared behind Jianchen. She studied the messy surroundings and said, I learnt from those people that all the Supreme God Kings trapped on this floor worked together and engaged in a battle to the death against the lizard. In the end, in exchange for the lives of almost 400 Supreme God Kings, they heavily injured the lizard, and it returned to the lava. The gigantic lizard should have been around the 8th heavenly layer of Infinite Prime. The 8th heavenly layer of Infinite Prime? That's quite unexpected. I never thought that such a powerful lizard would be heavily injured by a group of God Kings. Jianchen sighed emotionally. However, he also knew that these God Kings were nothing short of extraordinary. They all ranked on the God King's throne, and every single one of them possessed extremely great battle prowess. They also had several dozen God artifacts. Otherwise, let alone a few hundred God Kings, even if there were over 1,000 of them, they would have all been slaughtered by the lizard. Adriana shot a glance at Jianchen unhappily and said, You're still not satisfied? Do you want to see the lizard kill all the Supreme God Kings and only then will you be satisfied? Adriana sighed gently when she reached there. She became sorrowful. We've lost several hundred Supreme God Kings all of a sudden. That means almost half of all the names on the God King's throne have vanished. It has probably caused a huge ruckus outside now. What happened here has probably alarmed quite a few Grand Primes. There will definitely be Grand Primes waiting outside once we leave, Shui Yunlan said grimly. She looked at Jianchen and said sternly, "Now that it's like this, I can no longer leave through the main door of the Neptunian Divine Palace. The only way for me to leave is for the girl to gain the recognition of the Neptunian Divine Palace, and then send us off with the teleportation formation in here." Chapter 2155. The person behind it all. 3. Jianchen's heart also sank. He understood what Shui Yunlan was saying. After the Ice Goddess Hall had fallen into a crisis, Shui Yunlan was afraid that the person in control of the Ice Goddess Hall would find her and discover his sister's whereabouts as a result. Hence, Shui Yunlan needed to act carefully and not expose herself before those peak experts who could basically peer into everything. This was because no one could be certain whether any of the people who assisted the traders of the Ice Goddess Hall among these peak experts. No one could be certain whether any of them bore ill intentions towards the Ice Goddess Hall, or his sister either. Shui Yunlan's fate would be evident if an expert like that existed outside once she left through the main door. With Shui Yunlan's strength, she could claim to be invincible in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Apart from Qingshan, who ranked first on the God King's throne, Shui Yunlan still had not encountered an opponent that matched her evenly. Even the person who ranked second, Zhu Wen, had to work with two other Supreme God Kings who ranked in the top 10 to reach a stalemate against Shui Yunlan. However, once she went outside, Shui Yunlan would still be as puny as an ant before those chaotic primes or even grand primes. "Are you certain that there's a teleportation formation in the Neptunian Divine Palace?" Jianchen asked seriously as he looked at Shui Yunlan with shining eyes. Shui Yunlan nodded gently. "There definitely are. It's just that the teleportation formation is in a region sealed up from the public. There are only 3 ways to reach these. The first method is to overcome the obstructions with absolute strength, opening the sealed region to everyone." Shui Yunlan paused there before speaking bitterly. "The Neptunian Divine Palace is a high-quality god artifact. Its toughness is unimaginable, so even regular Grand Primes don't have the ability to open up this sealed region, let alone us. As a result, this method is impossible. The second method is to obtain the permission of the artifact spirit, and get the artifact spirit to send us there. However, from how it seems right now, this second method is also impossible. As a result, we only have one last method left, and that is for the Neptunian Divine Palace to take a master quickly before obtaining the permission of the new master, and having them send us out. It looks like we really have to get Xiao Man to gain the recognition of the Neptunian Divine Palace as soon as possible," Jianchen murmured. His gaze became determined and he said, "Let's go to the 12th floor first." Jianchen immediately held Shengguan Muer's hand, and left the 8th floor with everyone, climbing their way up. When their group arrived on the 9th floor, they discovered over 100 Supreme God Kings covered in wounds scattered around the passageway. They all sat on the ground, silently recovering through ingesting many pills. Jianchen glanced at them, and discovered that they were no different from the Supreme God Kings on the 7th floor. They were all heavily injured and covered with burn wounds. Some of them had even been charred by the terrifying heat of the lava, where a heavy, burnt smell still lingered in the air after a few days. Everyone was scattered in this region because they were absolutely exhausted. Not only were they extremely weak, but some of them were even barely clinging on to their lives. Even just moving from where they sat was an extremely difficult matter. They could not hurry off, so they could only heal on the spot. Although they managed to survive the battle against the gigantic lizard, they had clearly paid an unimaginable price as well. "Jianchen!" At this moment, a furious call rang out. Several hundred meters away, a Supreme God King with various parts charred suddenly stood up. His eyes were piercing like swords as he stared straight at Jianchen. A powerful sword intent radiated from him. Although he was heavily injured and blackened to the point where he was unrecognizable, he still possessed an astonishing presence when he stood up. "Zhu Wen!" Ru Di and Ji Yi both called out when they saw this person. Their gazes were strange and filled with shock. He was the expert who ranked second on the God King's throne, Zhu Wen. Not only was Zhu Wen in horrible shape, covered in severe burns, but there were even many vicious wounds on him as well. He was even missing huge chunks of flesh on certain parts of his body. Zhu Wen's long, graceful hair had vanished. It had been replaced by a bald, black head. His left arm was missing as well, only leaving behind his right arm. His current shape really was miserable. In the surroundings, the healing Supreme God Kings all opened their eyes. They all stared at Jianchen sharply, viciously, and hatefully. Clearly, these Supreme God Kings hated Jianchen from the bottom of their hearts due to what had happened on the 8th floor. Let's go directly to the 12th floor. Jianchen glanced past Zhu Wen indifferently. He did not stay for long. He made his way through the group with the people behind him as they continued upwards. He could already tell that the Supreme God Kings were basically incapacitated. They no longer posed a threat to him. Since they could no longer kill him, there was no point in wasting time there. No one dared to stand forward and block them from leaving in such a composed fashion. Many of them had gained a deep impression of Shui Yunlan and Adriana's strength, coupled with how Rui Di and Ji Yi were both experts who ranked in the top 10 of the God King's throne, and the 5 divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bixing. No one could pose a threat to them in the current situation. Even when Jianchen's group made their way past them, they still felt nervous and uneasy, as they were afraid that Jianchen would suddenly attack them. After all, they were nowhere close to their peak condition. Now that they had become so weakened that they were basically incapacitated, they could even die to the hands of an overgod. At this moment, the ground began to shake violently as if it was struck by something terrifying. It rose and fell drastically in an exaggerated and shocking fashion. The origin energy on the entire floor fell into a state of abnormal disorder as well. Even the moon in the sky completely lost its glow at that moment. Losing the only source of light, the entire Neptunian divine palace plunged into utter darkness. The sudden occurrence made Jianchen's group halt. They were all surprised as they looked around cluelessly. They were surprised and in doubt. What has happened? What is happening? No, impossible. The 5 elements of this space have become unstable. Yin and Yang are no longer balanced. Even the laws of the world have become chaotic. Heavens, I think I see the sky collapsing. The Neptunian moon has vanished. What is happening? It has become much more difficult to condense the power of laws. Cries from the Supreme God Kings constantly rang out from the surroundings. The sudden occurrence made all of their expressions change as they studied the surroundings uneasily. Even without the moonlight, the darkness was unable to affect them at all. All the people there could see very far away in the darkness without the use of the senses of their souls. Jianchen, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, and so on all frowned. They glanced at the surroundings sternly. They could clearly feel that the laws of the world in the Neptunian divine palace seemed to be influenced by a mysterious power, causing it to become extremely chaotic. It became several times more difficult for everyone to use the power of laws. Chapter 2156. The person behind it all. I don't know what has happened, but it can't be good. Look at the sky. Shui Yunlan's cold voice rang out. She currently had her head tilted as she stared at the black sky without blinking at all. Her cold, emotionless eyes bore a rare smear of seriousness. Everyone looked at the sky with that. Their eyes immediately narrowed. Even though the sky was pitch black, without any light, they could see through the darkness and void with their cultivation at God King. Currently, they could clearly see the sky shatter and vanish at a visible rate. It's the artifact spirit. It's the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace. The sudden occurrences to the Neptunian divine palace must be caused by the artifact spirit. A supreme God King healing nearby cried out. He looked at the sky with a multitude of emotions. There was eagerness, excitement as well as unease. Yep. It has to be related to the artifact spirit. Does this mean that the artifact spirit will be appearing? Another Supreme God King called out in surprise and delight. All the Supreme God Kings nearby struggled to remain calm when they heard that. Emotions flooded their eyes. They looked around with burning desire, eagerness, and hope. At the same time, many of them thought of something. The appearance of the artifact spirit meant that the Neptunian divine palace was about to take on a new owner. This made many of them nervous. Something is off, Jianchen growled. His gaze shone like a blaze as sword chi gathered. He paid extremely close attention to the sky as his heart weighed heavier and heavier. The changes to the sky at that moment made him experience a vague illusion, as if the sky was being devoured by a mysterious and great power. As a direct result, the sky shattered and was reduced to void. The Neptunian divine palace was changing. At the same time, an old man in simple robes sat on the highest mountain peak in the Neptunian mountains, several million kilometers from Jianchen and the others. He also stared at the pitch-black sky sternly. He was Master Qianlong. At this moment, a small set of formation banners flew out from Master Qianlong's space ring by itself. It radiated with a powerful pulse of energy, and immediately conjured a huge python. It stared at the sky with its snake eyes that were around the size of a normal human's head as its thick tail swept about uneasily. What is happening? Why do I suddenly feel very agitated, where I can't calm down at all? The python produced a mental pulse. In reality, the snake was conjured by the formation banners while there was a soul trapped within the banners. Master Qianlong glanced at the soul strangely when he heard that. He said, "You actually feel the same? That means we are the same." I've also become extremely irritated after the sky suddenly changed. It's like millions of ants are crawling on me. I can't calm down no matter what. Old man Qianlong, I suddenly have this urge to kill. The trapped soul abruptly became agitated. It revolved around Qianlong with much unease with its huge, serpentine body. Aren't you skilled in divination, where you can see through the heavenly secrets as well as peer into the past and the future? Have a look at what's happening. Master Qianlong sucked in a deep breath and forcefully remained calm. In reality, his breathing became more and more ragged while his heart beat faster and faster. The strange sense of irritation in him became more and more intense. There's nothing. I see nothing. I can't tell what's happening at all. At this moment, a beam of light suddenly appeared in the pitch-black sky. A sun had appeared silently. This was the Neptunian sun currently. The Neptunian sun no longer had its brightness from before. Not only was it extremely dim like a firefly, but it tottered in the sky as well. Run. Escape from here. The Neptunian divine palace is about to be lost. I can't last much longer. Run. As the gloomy Neptunian sun appeared, a weak voice rang out as well. It was obscure, but it resounded through the entire Neptunian divine palace. At that moment, the same voice rang through every inch of every floor of the Neptunian divine palace, allowing everyone to hear it clearly. When the voice ended, the dim Neptunian sun that had suddenly appeared in the sky vanished once again, swallowed up by the darkness. All the god kings gathered at the entrance of the 9th floor were stunned, but this only lasted for a very short moment. Afterwards, it was swallowed up by intense fear and dread. Even the expressions of Jianchen and the others changed suddenly. They suddenly realized that they were in trouble. Did the voice just then come from the artifact spirit? I can't find the origins of the voice at all. And the voice appeared with the strange Neptunian sun, so it must have come from the artifact spirit. Oh no, something is happening to the Neptunian divine palace. Run, everybody! The Neptunian divine palace is about to be lost. Even the godlike artifact spirit is about to die. We can't stay here. Run quickly. The expressions of all the supreme god kings gathered there changed drastically. After confirming that the voice came from the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace, they all became filled with angst. Run. Leave here as quickly as possible. Jianchen's heart also sank. Suddenly he called out to the people beside him. However, just when Jianchen had said those words, he suddenly became astounded. He staggered, and he actually lost his footing, falling right to the ground. Plop! Plop! Basically at the same time, the sounds of people collapsing in the surroundings rang out constantly. Even Adriana, Shui Yunlan, Rui Di Zhiyi, Shengguan Mu'er, Ming Dong, and the 5 divine generals seemed to lose all their power at that moment, having all collapsed onto the ground. Even the supreme god kings healing in the surroundings seemed to deflate like balloons. They either sat on the ground weakly, or they laid on the ground powerlessly. None of them remained standing. Jianchen's complexion became extremely horrible. At that moment, not only did he felt like he had lost all his power, where he could not even move a finger, but he could not even use the chaotic force within him. Most importantly, he seemed to lose the senses of his soul as well. He had completely been reduced to an ordinary person. Chapter 2157. Samsara 1. I can't even use origin energy. What's happening here? Oh no, a mysterious power has invaded my body. Not only have I lost all power, including my control over origin energy, but I can't even use the senses of my soul. My God King level laws that I have comprehended have departed from me. Has the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace suffered an accident? Has the Neptunian Divine Palace already gained a master? How is this possible? At that moment, the expressions of all the Supreme God Kings changed, and they cried out. They all lost their composure as their minds were filled with fear and great dread. Everyone faced the same situation. In that split second, these glorious Supreme God Kings had been completely reduced to ordinary people. Jianchen's heart became extremely heavy as well, and his face was ugly. He could sense that a mysterious power existed within his body. Even though it only seemed like an insignificant sliver, it was extremely powerful. Not only did it suppress the power of his soul, but even his chaotic force was suppressed. Even his loss of control over his body was caused by this power. What is this power? It's so terrifying. Jianchen was shocked. Currently, he had become extremely frail. Not only was he unable to stand, but he was not even able to take out the Anata Tower. Suddenly, Jianchen's eyes narrowed. He stared ahead in shock. His gaze pierced through the darkness. With great clarity, he saw an extremely terrifying power turn into thick mist at a visible rate. It rolled towards everyone, blotting out the sky and swallowing everything it passed by. Oh no! Run! Leave here quick. The Neptunian Divine Palace has already gained a master, and they're hostile. They want to kill us all. The Supreme God Kings gathered there all cried out. All of them exerted all their efforts to crawl towards the 8th floor. Many of them were panic-stricken because they could all sense a heavy killing intent from the mist that rolled over. It was terrifying, enough for all of them to experience chills. Even experts as powerful as Zhu Wen, Shui Yunlan, and Adriana experienced chills across their body as if they could not escape from the crisis. However, these people had lost all their power. Even when they strained every single muscle to crawl towards the 8th floor, they were as slow as snails. On the other hand, the mist that rolled over with sharp killing intent moved faster and faster. It was impossible for them to reach the 8th floor before the mist engulfed them. Jianchen stared straight at the almost demonic mist as he felt extremely flustered. He tried to come up with a countermeasure as hard as he could. Unfortunately, he was no different from the other Supreme God Kings. He too had been reduced to an ordinary person. He could not use the profound sword chi. He could not even open a space ring and take out the cosmic movement talisman inside. But just when Jianchen was at the end of his rope, his face suddenly froze, and afterwards, one of his eyes began to shine with a faint violet glow, while the other turned to a faint azure. The sword spirits in his body had suddenly appeared. They were cautious about being in front of so many Supreme God Kings, so they did not dare to appear directly. They could only borrow Jianchen's eyes to observe the situation of the outside world. It really is the power of Samsara. The sword spirits seemed to confirm their thoughts as they saw the terrifying power that flooded over. They cried out, clearly extremely shocked. Oh no! Master! This power of Samsara is extremely terrifying. You can't come in contact with it at all. With Master's current level of cultivation, Master can't put up any resistance against it. Even just becoming tainted by a tiny sliver will doom Master, Qing Sua said in a panic. The power of Samsara from the Samsaric immortal exalt. Jianchen smiled bitterly. The sword spirits had warned him far too late. It was also at this moment that the mist-like power of Samsara rolled in like a storm. It engulfed Jianchen and all the Supreme God Kings. Immediately, Jianchen felt his vitality rapidly leak away. The tremendous life force within him quickly withered while his soul dimmed. He became more and more powerless. In a daze, He seemed to see 6 huge discs hanging high above his head as if they were trying to pull him in. The power of Samsara was just too terrifying and frightening. Jianchen could not resist at all before the power of Samsara. Even Shui Yunlan and so on faced the same situation as Jianchen. Before the power of Samsara, none of them could resist. Their life force withered away as their souls dimmed. At this moment, the 9th floor was not the only place where the power of Samsara had appeared. All 12 floors had been engulfed by the power of Samsara. The 8th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace also became filled with the power of Samsara. The burning hot lava below darkened at a visible rate. The power of Samsara seemed to be able to permeate everything, where both the endless volcanoes and scorching hot lava were unable to stop its pace. Roar! At this moment, a furious beast's cry rang out. The gigantic lizard leapt out from the lava. There were vicious wounds on it. Its huge eyes were filled with a strange fear and alarm as if it wanted to escape from here. However, the light in its eyes dimmed very soon as if all of its power had vanished at that moment. Its colossal body that had been thrown into the air slammed into the lava loudly, gradually sinking back down. Even the 12th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace failed to avoid this fate. The 4 Grand Prime statues were also flooded by the power of Samsara. One of them collapsed, while the 3 remaining statues shone with a hazy light as they endured stubbornly. The only place unaffected in the entire Neptunian Divine Palace was the Neptunian Mountains on the 9th floor. However, the Grand Exalt's formation under the mountains was operating at full capacity as well, forming a huge barrier of energy that enveloped the entire place, blocking the power of Samsara. Master Chanlong stood on the highest peak in there, as he stared at the rampaging power of Samsara outside. He was extremely stern. The huge snake wrapped around beside him. Its illusionary eyes were grave as it stared at the world outside without blinking. Ancient paths. At this moment, an obscure voice appeared in the surroundings. The voice was ancient and also seemed aged as if it had experienced countless eras. It boomed through the entire Neptunian mountains with an aloof feeling, as if it was indifferent to everything. Chanlong and the huge python's eyes narrowed as they all looked at the same place. Right in front of them, a blurry figure hovered in the sky beyond the Neptunian mountains. The power of Samsara surged around him, seemingly forming a cloud that he stood on. From just a single glance, the blurry figure seemed like the ruler of the world. He even stood on the great power of Samsara. "Who are you?" Master Chanlong asked sternly. As soon as he saw the blurry figure, all the hairs on his body stood up as a chill ran down his spine. All the scales on the python beside him stood up as well while its eyes had shrunk into the size of a speck. "I am Samsaric," the blurry figure said. His ancient voice was filled with the endless power of the universe, disturbing the 3,000 laws and throwing them into disorder. Chapter 2158. Samsara too, Samsaric? Master Chanlong murmured in confusion. He found the name to be familiar as if he had heard it somewhere before. However, in the next moment, Master Chanlong shuddered violently. He stared right at the blurry figure outside the Neptunian mountains and cried out in shock. "Why? You're the Samsaric immortal exalt who destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia single-handedly?" After learning the person's identity, Master Chanlong's heart was in turmoil. He was extremely shocked and felt great disbelief. The legends about the Samsaric immortal exalt had been piercing to his ears ever since he entered the Neptunian Divine Palace. However, every single rumor was extremely astonishing, enough for any god king who heard it for the first time to feel completely astounded. The Taoist sect of Neptunia was a peak organization that shook up and dominated in the saints' world. Not only did it possess millions of disciples, but it even had 4 Grand Primes. One of the Grand Primes had almost reached a state of perfection with their cultivation, and was known as one of the most powerful experts below Grand Exalt in the past. It was possible to imagine just how glorious and prosperous the Taoist sect of Neptunia had been in the past with such a powerful ancestor. However, the Samsaric immortal exalt had single-handedly destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia, that seemed monstrous in the eyes of many in the saints' world. The 4 Grand Primes, including the Ancestor only second to Grand Exalts, all died in the Neptunian Divine Palace. No one managed to survive. If it were not for the arrival of one of the 7 grand exalts of the saints' world, the grand exalt of ancient ways, the Taoist sect of Neptunia probably would not even have been able to protect the Neptunian divine palace, a high-quality god artifact. It definitely would have been smashed to pieces by the Samsaric immortal exalt. This was more than enough to demonstrate the might of the Samsaric immortal exalt. Yet, at this current moment, the Samsaric immortal exalt that seemed to belong to legends to Master Qianlong had actually appeared before him in person. It impacted him tremendously. The trapped soul beside Qianlong widened its snake eyes as well. It also stared ahead in complete shock at the blurry figure that claimed to be the Samsaric immortal exalt. Its shock had reached its limit as well. Even though they could not see the blurry figure's appearance, they could sense a terrifying, overwhelming pressure from him. The figure said nothing. He only hovered in the sky silently as the terrifying power of Samsara surged violently like a raging river, condensing into a cloud beneath his feet. It did seem like he was riding a cloud. He did not confirm his identity, nor did he deny it. He just silently stood outside the Neptunian mountains for a while, as if he was staring at where Qianlong stood. A while later, his figure turned into the power of Samsara and vanished like mist. He did not enter the Neptunian mountains. Several million kilometers away, Jianchen and all the injured supreme god kings laid on the ground powerlessly. They had been enveloped by the power of Samsara, and their vitality drained away rapidly. They became weaker and weaker from the tremendous loss of vitality. Our vitality is about to be completely drained away, but the mysterious energy shows no signs of stopping. Are we all going to die here today? Rui Di said bitterly. He did not fear death. However, he found it regretful to just die here unknowingly. According to the rumor that has always existed, when the Neptunian moon appears, something big will happen to the Neptunian divine palace. Many people believe this to be the awakening of the artifact's spirit and the selection of a new master, but it looks like this was what it was really referring to. Shui Yunlan sighed. I don't mind dying here, but what will happen to Her Majesty? Her Majesty is still very weak right now. It'll be very difficult for her to survive in the saints' world alone. Shui Yunlan suddenly thought of the snow goddess, who was still waiting for her cultivation resources. Immediately, Shui Yunlan became worried. At this moment, a long howl suddenly rang out from beside Shui Yunlan. Jian Chun, who had originally collapsed on the ground, suddenly shone with a faint red glow. The moment the red glow appeared, a desolate presence that seemed to come from the primordial past surged out. Along with it came a terrifying presence that completely exceeded Jian Chen's current strength, striking fear in many supreme god kings. Pressured by the power of Samsara, Jian Chen used the power of the bloodline from the ancient skywolf within him. It formed a paper-thin barrier around him. After using the power of the bloodline, the power of Samsara that permeated the entire Neptunian divine palace seemed to be pushed away temporarily. As the bloodline's power rapidly drained away, Jian Chen gradually recovered some strength. He sat up with great difficulty. His actions immediately stunned everyone present. They all stared at him and showed shock. Ignoring the gazes around him, Jian Chen slowly closed his eyes and concentrated on gathering up all the power of his soul. He wanted to take out the Anata Tower, throw the people around him into it, and then leave here with the Cosmic Movement Talisman in a single stroke. However, whether it was taking out the Anata Tower, or taking out the Cosmic Movement Talisman from his space ring, all of these actions required the use of the power of his soul. If it were some other time, it would have naturally been effortless for him to do that. However, now that he was enveloped by the power of Samsara, he could only rely on the thin barrier erected by the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline to gather slivers of the power of his soul and complete what he needed to do. Hurry up! Hurry up! As Jian Chen gathered the power of his soul, he was filled with anxiety. The power of the bloodline drained far too quickly. He could not last much longer. There's actually the presence of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. At this moment, an ancient voice rang out of nowhere, booming through the surroundings. As the voice rang out, the power of Samsara in the surroundings churned violently. Nearby, an illusionary figure that seemed to be a part of the power of Samsara silently appeared. As soon as the figure appeared, it seemed to dominate the entire world. causing the laws in the surroundings to undergo some mysterious changes. The barrier around Jianchen shattered instantly, as if the laws of the world had pressed against it. Samsaric Immortal Exalt, please have mercy. At this moment, an azure and a violet ball of light suddenly appeared above Jianchen's head. The sword spirits had appeared, turning into a young man and woman who seemed to be in their 20s. They gazed at the blurry figure excitedly. The appearance of the sword spirits caused the power of Samsara around the Samsaric Immortal Exalt to pulse unnaturally. He called out, Ziying Qingxua. Why have the two of you appeared in the saint's world? The Samsaric Immortal Exalt's ancient voice was filled with surprise. Chapter 2159, Samsara 3. It's a long story. Samsaric Immortal Exalt. Please stay your hand and not harm our master, Ziying pleaded. His voice was filled with respect. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt strode over and arrived before Jianchen. At the same time, his illusionary figure condensed from the power of Samsara gradually gained flesh, blood, and life. It shone with the light of life, which surged like a tremendous ocean. When the Samsaric Immortal Exalt arrived before Jianchen, he had turned into an old man with flesh and blood. Silver draped to his waist, and he had a healthy glow to his face. His old eyes were profound like the vast cosmos. 6 blurry discs of Samsara seemed to revolve within them, containing the profound truths of the world. It was like he could peer through the mysteries of the universe and grasp the supreme laws. As the Samsaric Immortal Exalt studied Jianchen, Jianchen also opened his eyes and stared at the Samsaric Immortal Exalt curiously. He felt extremely curious and much admiration towards the Samsaric Immortal Exalt, who was one of the 5 grand exalts of the Immortals world. This was because the Samsaric Immortal Exalt had destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia alone. His strength was evident. He was truly a sovereign of the world, a supreme existence. The first feeling that Jianchen experienced from the Samsaric Immortal Exalt was that he seemed to be covered in an immortal presence. There was a sense of mysteriousness, like he was shrouded in mist. It seemed like he could stand on the clouds. Even though he just stood there very casually, it felt like he had fused with the universe as the laws of the world. However, when Jianchen's eyes met the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's, he immediately felt his head spin and his soul lose control. It felt like his soul was about to leave his body and be drawn away by the discs of Samsara in the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's eyes. In shock, Jianchen closed his eyes as soon as possible. He no longer looked at the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's eyes. Instead, he silently stabilized his soul. I never thought I'd meet the successor of that old guy in a foreign land. Sigh, it's just a pity that you cultivate the chaotic body, so your future is destined to be limited. You probably can't bear the burden. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt stared at Jianchen and sighed gently as if he was extremely disappointed about Jianchen's chaotic body. Naturally, Jianchen could tell that he was disappointed in him as the successor of the sword sect of Violet Heavens, because there were plenty of people who cultivated the chaotic body in the Immortals world, but no one had been able to become an Immortal Exalt throughout history. As time went on, it turned into a concept that the peak of the chaotic body was Immortal Emperor. Even though the chaotic body was very powerful, known to be invincible among the same realm of cultivation, and was even powerful enough to challenge those at a higher level of cultivation, Immortal Emperors would still be restricted by their cultivation. No matter how impressive or astonishing their battle prowess was, they were still an Immortal Emperor in the end. Before those supreme grand exalts that seemed to have become the laws of the world, they remained as puny as ants, unable to put up any resistance. As a result, Jianchen's future was predetermined in the eyes of the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. He believed it was impossible for Jianchen to reach the same level of cultivation as the old master of the sword spirits. Samsaric Immortal Exalt, you must not underestimate our master. Our master isn't as simple as you think he is. We believe the rumor that the chaotic body cannot progress to Immortal Exalt will be disproven by our master. The sword spirits said confidently. They originated from Yin and Yang Qi, so they possess certain innate advantages and abilities. From time to time, they could see secrets of the world that even grand exalts could not forecast. They knew Jianchen was extraordinary. Senior Samsaric, There are some people here that are my friends. I hope you can show mercy and spare them this time. Jianchen was no longer affected by the power of Samsara now. He stood up with great difficulty and bowed towards the Samsaric immortal exalt out of respect. Currently, all the supreme god kings in the surroundings had fainted with the appearance of the Samsaric immortal exalt. Jianchen was the only one who remained conscious. Don't worry. None of them will die. I didn't hide a sliver of the power of my soul in the Neptunian divine palace for all these years to deal with these kids, said the Samsaric immortal exalt. Regardless of how monstrous a talent these supreme god kings possessed, they still did not catch his attention. Senior Samsaric, may I ask how the Neptunian divine palace's artifact spirit is doing now? Jianchen asked. He had many questions he wanted to ask. Whether it was about the Neptunian divine palace or the immortal's world, he wanted to understand them all through the Samsaric immortal exalt. In particular, the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace was the matter that Jianchen cared about the most right now. The artifact spirit has only been temporarily suppressed by me. My original body is far away in the saint's world, so it's impossible for me to kill the artifact spirit in a short amount of time with just a sliver of the power of my soul, said the Samsaric immortal exalt. Jianchen was shocked. The Samsaric immortal exalt had only used a sliver of the power of his soul to become a godlike existence in the Neptunian divine palace. He could casually suppress the artifact spirit that possessed the power of the divine hall. If his original body had come, just how terrifying would he have been? He could probably shatter the Neptunian divine palace with just a wave of his wand, crushing the artifact spirit between his fingers. Samsaric immortal exalt, may we ask how the sword sect of Violet Heavens is doing right now? Does it still exist in the immortal's world? The sword spirits also asked. They were extremely nervous, as if they were afraid of learning something they would struggle to accept. Although they were only sword spirits, the twin swords were the sect treasures of the sword sect of Violet Heavens after all. The sword spirits held a unique feeling towards the sword sect of Violet Heavens. The Samsaric immortal exalt fell silent when the sword spirits mentioned the sword sect of Violet Heavens. His response made the hearts of the sword spirits suddenly sink. Sorrow filled their faces. They asked in a trembling voice, "Has the sword sect of Violet Heavens ceased to exist?" Jianchen's heart shivered from that. He felt nothing towards the sword sect of Violet Heavens. He had not even seen it before, but he was still the successor of the sect after all. If the sword sect of Violet Heavens had really been destroyed, it would be difficult on him as well. Sigh. The Samsaric immortal exalt exhaled gently. He shook his head. The sword sect of Violet Heavens still exists, but the situation might not be very optimistic right now. The Samsaric immortal exalt paused there and looked at Jianchen. He said seriously, "If your identity still hasn't been exposed in the saint's world, then it's best for you to stay here for a while. Before you've become powerful, returning to the immortal's world rashly won't turn out well." Senior Samsaric. Enough. We can talk later. I have even more important matters to attend to. These matters will affect the future of the immortal's world. The Samsaric immortal exalt cut off Jianchen. He was unwilling to talk anymore. Afterwards, he looked at the unconscious supreme god kings in the surroundings and suddenly reached out. With that, the space in the surroundings suddenly shrank up, having been affected. To Jianchen's utter disbelief, he saw threads of various sizes being drawn from the supreme god kings. They all gathered in the Samsaric immortal exalt's hands. These are threads of karma? Jianchen's face immediately changed when he recognized the threads of energy of various thicknesses. Immediately he arrived before Shangguan Moore and pointed at Mingdong, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Ruidi and Jiyi. He said, "Senior, these are all my friends. Please spare them." Although he knew that the Samsaric immortal exalt would not touch their lives, Jianchen sensed an ill omen when he saw their threads of karma being drawn out. The Samsaric immortal exalt looked away and stared at Jianchen deeply. His face sank slightly. "They're from the saint's world." But not all people of the saint's world are enemies of the immortal's world. Moreover, some of them have extremely close ties with me, enough for me to risk my life to protect them, Jianchen said boldly and with determination. In reality, He had already become rather terrified. After all, he was facing one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortals world. Even if he was just a clone, Jianchen still felt tremendous psychological pressure. Chapter 2160. The Way of Karma. The Samsaric immortal exalt looked at Jianchen silently. His ancient gaze that was as profound as the vast universe gradually sharpened. In the eyes of the Samsaric immortal exalt, it was basically impossible for Jianchen to reach the peak. He believed that it would be impossible for Jianchen to become someone that a grand exalt would take seriously, as he cultivated the chaotic body. However, Jianchen was still the successor of the sword sect of Violet Heavens after all. No matter how great his future accomplishments would be and no matter how far he would be able to travel, he still belonged to the immortals world. The immortals world happened to oppose the saints' world. Under such a tense situation, he had become so close to the people of the saints' world. This displeased the Samsaric immortal exalt greatly. Whatever. A while later, the Samsaric immortal exalt sighed gently. The sharpness in his gaze gradually vanished, and his eyes became profound once again. He said, "I'll spare these people seeing how you're the only successor of that old guy." As he said that, the Samsaric immortal exalt's hand loosened slightly, and the threads of karma from Shangguan Mu'er, Mingdong, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Rui Di, and Ji Yi immediately broke free from his grasp, returning to them. Out of the kids you want to protect, 3 of them have quite significant origins. They're closely related to grand exalts of the saints' world. If I were to play around with their karma, those people would definitely notice, so even if you didn't mention it, I wouldn't touch 3 of these people, said the Samsaric immortal exalt. Every single person had different backgrounds and came in contact with different people, so their threads of karma would be different. Through the threads of karma, he had discovered that Adriana, Shui Yunlan, and Mingdong actually had karma with the grand exalts of the saints' world. This prevented him from touching them recklessly. Jianchen immediately became relieved when he heard that the Samsaric immortal exalt would not touch Shangguan Mu'er and so on. He looked at the threads of karma in the Samsaric immortal exalt's hand, and gradually revealed doubt. He could clearly see that there were over 1,000 threads of karma that differed from each other in the Samsaric immortal exalt's hand. Over 100 of them came from the Supreme God Kings nearby, while the rest seemed to have passed through space, reaching over here from somewhere unknown. A fire-red thread that was clearly much thicker than the rest raised Jianchen's attention. Jianchen seemed to sense the presence of the gigantic lizard from it. This allowed him to immediately confirm that the thread of karma came from the lizard. At this moment, Jianchen's eyes suddenly narrowed. He discovered in great surprise that the thread of karma from the lizard had suddenly splayed out into many thin threads. The end of each thread was connected to a Supreme God King there. And there was actually a thread that was connected to Jianchen. Jianchen's eyes narrowed and he glanced around. He discovered that the only people who did not have the lizard's thread of karma was Shangguan Mu'er, Mingdong, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Rui Di and Ji Yi. They had never had any contact with the lizard from the lava. Karma. Jianchen sank into his thoughts when he realized this. He seemed to have comprehended something, gaining a rough understanding of the way of karma. I never would have thought that you can actually see the threads of karma. The Samsaric immortal exalt's voice rang out. He looked at Jianchen with quite some surprise and said, "You can see the threads of karma means that you've grasped the way of karma." The Samsaric immortal exalt retracted his gaze, and he looked at the threads of karma in his control. He said in thought, "Everything in the world is bound by karma, ranging from newly born infants to grand exalts who stand at the apex of the world. No one can break free from karma. The communication and contact of people will lead to karma, and the creation of threads of karma. They represent the ties you've formed with these people. The contact between immortals, maybe in kindness or maybe in grievance, will also lead to karma and the formation of threads of karma. Just like the red thread you're looking at right now. It comes from the natural spirit that was born from the endless fire-attributed energy on the 8th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace. You lot have come into contact with this natural spirit and have fought it, so a thread of karma has been formed between you and the natural spirit. However, The people you want to protect clearly have never come in contact or conflict with the natural spirit at all, so their relationship is a clean slate. Naturally, there are no threads of karma. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt said slowly, explaining many secrets about the way of karma, allowing Jianchen to deepen his understanding. Senior Samsaric, do you plan on using the threads of karma from these supreme god kings to find the people behind them? Jianchen asked. As his understanding of karma gradually deepened, he seemed to understand the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's intentions. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt nodded. That's right. Since these kids are supreme god kings, their backgrounds are definitely significant. Through these threads of karma, I can easily find people that they have karma with. If they have close ties with some chaotic primes or even grand primes, I can even find these experts through the threads of karma. With my mastery of the way of karma and the vitality and bloodlines of these people, I can surpass both space and time to plant a demonic seed in all the people they have karma with. As long as I don't touch those grand primes that are far too outstanding, no one will be able to sense it. Jianchen was shocked. That way, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt could use these supreme god kings to deal with over 100 major organizations simultaneously, and plant demonic seeds in the hearts of countless people. Even some regular grand primes would not be able to avoid this. It was just too terrifying. Although he had no idea what would happen once someone had a demonic seed planted within them, he knew that it could not be good without even thinking. Unfortunately, many people were killed by the natural spirit on the 8th floor, so there's only around 100 of them left, which is all the people here. As for the people scattered elsewhere, not a lot of them have ties with experts, so they're not particularly useful. Continued the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. He was filled with pity. Senior Samsaric, why must you do this? Jianchen asked. For the Immortals' world, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt replied sternly. Afterwards, with a thought of his, all the vitality that had been drained from the God Kings appeared in the air. Over 100 of them formed transparent little balls of light. They hovered above each supreme god king as they gradually approached their threads of karma. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt had begun to take action. He attempted to use the threads of karma to find the people behind these supreme god kings, and plant a demonic seed in the hearts of everything they had established karma with. Senior Samsaric, you're a grand exalt of the Immortals world after all, an existence that stands at the apex of a world. Yet, you're actually moving against these juniors today. Isn't that just degrading? At this moment, a woman's voice boomed out. It was extremely pleasant, just like the sounds of nature. There was a condescending sense of coldness in the voice. As the woman's voice rang out, the entire Neptunian divine palace shook violently. The power of Samsara that permeated every inch of the place churned violently. Chapter 2161. A figure of supreme power. The sudden voice made Jianchen's expression change. He stared at the churning power of Samsara in the surroundings, as well as the Neptunian divine palace that trembled violently. His heart suddenly sank as he realized that the situation now was anything but reassuring. A supreme expert had already arrived at the Neptunian divine palace. They were strong enough to ignore the powerful defenses of a high-grade god artifact, and directly overcome the various obstructions through raw power and rush in from outside, which was more than enough to prove their strength. I never thought the experts of the Saints' world would arrive so quickly. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt became stern. He turned around and looked at Jianchen with shining eyes as he said sternly, "The person who has come is extremely powerful. I'm nowhere close to being their opponent with just this clone of mine. I've already erased the threads of karma between us. Remember, do not return to the Immortals' world before your identity has been exposed, and even if you do end up returning to the Saints' world, do not reveal the Sword Spirits until you are powerful enough. The Sword Spirits are unique existences in the world. The fusion of the two swords has the power to split heaven and earth. When that old guy wielded them in the past, no one dared to eye the swords in the Immortals' world, but ever since that old guy died, those other immortal exalts of the Immortals' world have become fearless. They've been constantly searching for the Sword Spirits in the past few years. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt warned sternly. Before Jianchen could reply, he pointed at Jianchen. Immediately, a great power of Samsara slammed against Jianchen. causing him to return to his previous state despite recovering some power recently. He completely lost control of his body at that moment, and he collapsed onto the ground powerlessly. Moreover, the pain he experienced this time was countless times more intense than in the past. Not only did he become extremely weak in a split second, but he even became extremely drowsy as well, almost falling unconscious. Jianchen bit his tongue viciously when he was about to fall unconscious, as he tried his hardest to remain awake. Fortunately, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt treated Jianchen differently compared to the other Supreme God Kings. Seeing how Jianchen did not want to fall unconscious, he did not force him to. Since you're not afraid of being exposed, allow me to gift you a fortuitous encounter. Whether you can benefit from it will be up to you, said the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. In the next moment, Jianchen felt the world spin around him. A sliver of his soul had been whisked away by the Samsaric Immortal Exalt, having become a part of him. In a trance, Jianchen felt like he experienced an illusion as if he had become the Samsaric Immortal Exalt at that moment, where the Samsaric Immortal Exalt was him. He seemed to have fused with the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. Boom! At this moment, a deafening sound rang out. It was much louder than before, as if it came from the interior of the Neptunian Divine Palace. Have you already entered the Neptunian Divine Palace? You're quite a lot faster than I expected. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt raised his head at the sky and became stern. Afterwards, one of his hands shifted between gestures rapidly, and the threads of karma that were connected to it changed as well. This is my usage of the way of karma. Comprehend it closely. Whether you can understand it or not will be up to your affinity for comprehension. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt's voice rang out. Jianchen's sliver of soul that had fused with the Samsaric Immortal Exalt immediately began to pay close attention, comprehending the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's way of karma seriously. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt was a Grand Exalt who had reached the peak of a world. The personal guidance of a Grand Exalt was a fortuitous encounter enough to change the fates of people. He knew that this opportunity was extremely precious, so he appreciated it dearly. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt purposefully slowed down his actions, showing Jianchen in the clearest fashion possible. He was truly passing on his way of karma to Jianchen selflessly. Jianchen clearly saw the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's usage of the way of karma. At the same time, he saw the threads of karma from the Supreme God Kings change in the Samsaric Immortal Exalt's hands. As they changed, a mysterious power seemed to become planted in the Supreme God Kings through their threads of karma. Although Jianchen had no idea what this mysterious power was, he did know that it was the demonic seed the Samsaric Immortal Exalt had mentioned. Originally, I wanted to use the threads of karma to plant demonic seeds in all the people behind them, but it looks like I won't make it, the Samsaric Immortal Exalt said with pity. Just as he said those words, the pitch-black sky of the 9th floor suddenly became extremely bright. It shone as brightly as the sun, illuminated the surroundings completely. The Samsaric Immortal Exalt no longer paid any more attention to the Supreme God King scattered there. He stood with his arms behind his back as he stared at the sky. In the sky, a hazy figure descended slowly in the rays of light. As the person arrived, the universe rumbled, the sky roared, and the ground trembled. All the laws pulsed as if the person was like a god of the world. Her arrival caused the heavens and earth to change in response. The power of laws formed a blurry flight of stairs beneath her such that it seemed like she made her way down the stairs as she descended. She radiated with blinding light. Not only did she illuminate every inch of the Neptunian Divine Palace like the sun, but the power of Samsara from the Samsaric Immortal Exalt was also slowly purged under the light. Light gradually replaced the space occupied by the power. This woman is extremely terrifying. She can probably pierce through the heavens and destroy worlds just by raising her hand. Jianchen studied the hazy woman as he had fused with the Samsaric Immortal Exalt, and he was filled with shock. He knew that the woman's cultivation had reached an unbelievable level. No wonder even the Neptunian Divine Palace, a high-quality god artifact, can't stop you for long. As it turns out, you're only a step away from perfection. There are barely any experts in both the Immortals world and the Saints world that can reach your level of cultivation. Who are you? Which organization do you belong to? The woman stood at a level equal to the Samsaric immortal exalt. She radiated with light, enshrouding her figure so that she could not be seen clearly. She bowed slightly towards the Samsaric immortal exalt due to his seniority and said in a cool voice, "I am Exin. My master is the Anata Grand Exalt. Greetings to Senior Samsaric. I never would have thought that Anata has such an outstanding disciple. I can see that your presence of laws is close to being full, and your soul is astonishing. The final step to completion shouldn't be far away for you." The Samsaric immortal exalt sighed emotionally. Chapter 2162. Samsara returns. Thank you for your praise, Senior Samsaric, Exin said calmly and emotionlessly. Afterwards, she stared at the nearby Mingdong for a while before glancing across the Supreme God Kings there slowly. She said, "Senior Samsaric, you're a renowned Grand Exalt of the Immortals world, an existence revered by all immortals. Now you're actually moving against these juniors today. Isn't that just degrading with your status?" The Samsaric immortal exalt completely disdained to explain. He stood above the clouds in the air with his arms behind his back as a powerful presence flooded out. He chuckled, "Cut the bullsh *T. Do it. I'd like to see how long you'd take to disperse this clone of mine." Exin's eyes immediately narrowed when she heard that. She clasped her fist towards the Samsaric immortal exalt gently and said coldly, "If that's the case, I'll be causing offense." With that, the Exin shrouded by light suddenly became extremely blinding. Her presence surged up, destroying space, shattering the sky, and making the galaxies pale. The entire 9th floor seemed to approach ruin. Of course, this was only an illusion. A grand scene created on the 9th floor because Exin's presence was just too terrifying. The Neptunian Divine Palace was a high-quality god artifact after all. It was extremely tough, where even with Exin's astonishing strength, she was unable to destroy an entire floor through her presence alone. At this moment, Exin took action. Her figure floated firmly in the air as her slender hand gently pressed towards the Samsaric immortal exalt from afar. With that, the laws of the universe immediately appeared and formed chains. An unimaginable force seemed to compress the space before her, directly collapsing the space into darkness. The collapsed space rapidly spread towards the Samsaric immortal exalt at an unbelievable pace. Jianchen personally witnessed Exin's attack, as he had fused with the Samsaric immortal exalt. Immediately, he became extremely shocked. Exin was just too powerful. The level at which she stood had completely surpassed the boundary of Jianchen's understanding and knowledge. Just a casual strike from her materialized the laws of the world, filled with endless mysteries. The terrifying power directly caused the tough space of the Neptunian Divine Palace to collapse. The Samsaric immortal exalt's face did not change, but his old eyes still ended up becoming filled with sternness. He extended a finger at the sky, and the power of Samsara surged out from behind him. It condensed into 6 huge black holes as a disk of Samsara above his head as the power of Samsara surged out endlessly. The Samsaric immortal exalt engaged in an intense battle against Exin in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Energy collided with energy as laws clashed with laws, creating deafening booms, and causing the space of the Neptunian Divine Palace to constantly collapse. The sky had already been destroyed, having descended into darkness while the ground had vanished as well, becoming a bottomless chasm. The entire Neptunian Divine Palace had almost been pierced all the way through. As a sliver of Jianchen's soul had fused with the Samsaric immortal exalt, he actually felt like he was in the Samsaric immortal exalt's shoes as he fought Exin. It was like it was not the Samsaric immortal exalt fighting, but himself. Not only could he sense wonders of the laws of destruction from Exin, but he could also clearly sense the power of Samsara used by the Samsaric immortal exalt. Moreover, Jianchen was deeply exposed to their usage of energy, tricks with laws, and the feeling as if they were a part of laws. He benefited greatly, feeling that a gate had been opened for him, allowing him to see the world in another way. However, times of happiness would always be fleeting. The state of being submerged in joy as he absorbed the battle experience from the two supreme experts only lasted for a few seconds. Afterwards he was forced out. Immediately, Heavy exhaustion descended. Only now did he come to the realization that the sliver of his soul that had fused with the samsaric immortal exalt had become extremely weak. Moreover, he could closely sense that the samsaric immortal exalt had become extremely weak, so weak that his clone had almost dispersed in the wind. Even though it remained stable under the samsaric immortal exalt's great control, he could not last for long. He neared collapse. On the other side, Wuxia basked in light as she stood there unscathed. The laws of the universe revolved around her. She seemed like a supreme goddess, otherworldly and transcendent. The samsaric immortal exalt was finally defeated in his battle against Wuxia. After all, Wuxia's cultivation was so great that she only required one last step before she reached completion. She was one of the few supreme experts in the saints' world, an existence that stood at the apex and was only second to grand exalts. Although the samsaric immortal exalt was revered as one of the grand exalts of the immortals' world, he was naturally not Wuxia's opponent when he was just a clone. Although I don't have high hopes for you because you cultivate the chaotic body, maybe you really are different since the sword spirits have chosen you. I hope that you really can be like what the sword spirit said and create a miracle. At this moment, the samsaric immortal exalt's voice rang out in Jian Chen's soul. Even though the samsaric immortal exalt's soul was about to collapse, the voice was still filled with force. This was a form of mental communication, so even when the supreme Wuxia was nearby, she was unable to detect this voice. There's one more matter that you must remember. Do not let the pernight or on the 8th floor fall into the hands of people from the saints' world. Although it's only a high-grade god-tier material, it's something crucial to making an ultimate weapon. This kind of weapon does not come from this aeon. It can be traced back to the previous aeon, or even the aeon before that. Its power cannot be imagined by experts of this aeon. Once it is forged, the immortals' world and the demons' worlds will face disaster. In the past, I journeyed to the saints' world alone and destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia, because of all the pernight ore in their possession. Even the clone I left here was primarily for the pernight Oregon. Using the threads of karma to plant a demonic seed in the people behind the supreme god kings was only a secondary reason. Originally, I wanted to plant demonic seeds in the people behind these supreme god kings through their threads of karma, before finding a way to destroy the pernight or directly taking it away. However, I had never thought that when I disturbed the heavenly secrets to prevent the grand exalts of the saints' world from peering into what was happening, a supreme expert of the saints' world would still arrive so quickly, giving me no time to complete these matters. As a result, I can only leave these incomplete matters to you. In the Neptunian mountains, there is a person and a soul that resides within a set of formation banners. You have threads of karma that link to them, so you should know about them. If you are able to defeat them, you have to find a way to kill them once they leave the Neptunian mountains. If they die, then even if the pernight or ends up in the hands of people from the saints' world, it'll only be an impressive material. You'll be able to avoid the fate of the immortals' world facing this ultimate weapon. When the samsaric immortal exalt said that, Jianchen immediately felt his soul throb slightly. The world around him spun as he directly lost contact with that sliver of his soul. The sliver of his soul had dispersed with the samsaric immortal exalt's clone. Chapter 2163. First Senior Sister. Although Jianchen had lost a sliver of his soul, everything he experienced after it fused with the samsaric immortal exalt was returned to his body, allowing him to clearly remember all that he went through. The samsaric immortal exalt's clone dispersed in the surroundings while Wuxia hovered in the air unscathed. The overwhelming presence that she gave off before had been withdrawn now. Apart from the radiant glow around her, no one could sense any of her cultivation at all. The power of Samsara that permeated the Neptunian divine palace rapidly dispersed under the purification of Wuxia's light. The power would be reduced to nothing wherever the light reached. In the blink of an eye, not a single sliver of power of Samsara remained in the Neptunian divine palace. It was not just the 9th floor. The light had also purified the power of Samsara on the 11 other floors. Without the suppression of the power of Samsara, the Supreme God Kings unconscious on the 9th floor all woke up. They were clearly extremely weak, as they had lost large amounts of their vitality. Something as effortless as just standing up had now become extremely difficult for them. What happened? Strange, why was I unconscious? All of them were confused when they woke up as if they could not remember what had just happened. Jianchen also opened his eyes. He shook his drowsy head and slowly stood up. He glanced around and saw Shangguan Mu'er, Mingdong, Adriana, Shui Yunlan, Rui Di, and Ji Yi all wake up and stand up with difficulty. Are you alright? Jianchen endured the powerlessness he felt as he walked over with great difficulty. He asked out of concern. Jianchen was the same as the people around him, having lost a great deal of his vitality. He was extremely weak right now. The Samsaric immortal exalt did not return his vitality to him. However, Jianchen understood that the Samsaric immortal exalt did not return the vitality, because he wanted him to be the same as everyone else. Otherwise, it would naturally raise the attention and doubts of the supreme expert present if everyone else was weak while he was fine. That would lead to unwanted problems, or it could even expose his identity. However, even with that being the case, Jianchen was unsettled and nervous. He knew just how powerful the woman who hovered in the sky was. He had no confidence in hiding his secrets before a supreme expert like that. Once the sword spirits were exposed, he would face unthinkable consequences. So close. It really was so close just then. We almost just died here. The existence of that power actually cut off all methods of communication. I couldn't even ask for help from my 8th senior sister. Ming Dong stood up haggardly as he said in lingering fear. Oomph. At this moment, a cold snort suddenly rang out. Only now did all the people gathered there apart from Jianchen notice the woman who basked in blinding light in the air. She seemed like the sun right now, shining with resplendent light that illuminated the surroundings, turning the gloomy Neptunian divine palace back into daytime. No one could see her face clearly. All they could see was a hazy figure of supreme power. At this moment, Xian ignored the supreme god kings in the surroundings and only glared at Ming Dong. She said coldly, "Soul injured and vitality lost. If it were not for the god-tier pills, you probably wouldn't even be alive right now. Just a trip to the Neptunian divine palace has almost claimed your life. You really do know how to embarrass the heavenly palace of Bishing." Under Xian's glare, Ming Dong immediately felt like he was being stabbed by needles. However, he showed no fear. He looked up at Xian and said, "And who are you? What has the matters of our heavenly palace of Bishing got to do with you?" While Ming Dong said that, the 5 divine generals behind him bowed politely. They all called out, "Greetings to the First Majesty." First Majesty. Ming Dong was startled when he heard the divine general's words. Even all the supreme god kings gathered there became stunned and filled with shock. The words First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing was piercing to their ears. She was a supreme expert who stood at the apex of the world, and also a terrifying figure that could make the ancestors of all the peak organizations in the Saints' world suffocate. At the same time, it was because of her existence that the heavenly palace of Bishing could remain standing in the Saints' world after losing the Anata Grand Prime. At this very moment, a supreme figure that only existed in legends had actually appeared before all the supreme god kings. This threw them into emotional turmoil. Junior greets the First Majesty. Aside from Ming Dong, all the people gathered there bowed politely. Even Adriana and Shui Yunlan bowed. In order to not stand out, Jianchen copied everyone and bowed towards Xian who was basked in the light. "You're my first senior sister?" Ming Dong stared at Xian blankly as he said in surprise. He had never seen his mysterious first senior sister before. However, when all the supreme god kings present heard Ming Dong's words, they felt like they had been struck by a bolt of lightning, utterly stunning them. Their hearts churned. Having become dumbstruck after hearing what Ming Dong had said, they could all tell that Ming Dong was related to the heavenly palace of Bishing, as he was protected by the 5 divine generals, but none of them knew just how he was connected. However, to all of their disbelief, Ming Dong's relationship with the heavenly palace of Bishing was actually so astonishing that he could directly refer to the First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing as his first senior sister. They all understood what this meant. It made them tremble in fear as their opinions of Ming Dong were completely overthrown. "You still have the dignity to call me your first senior sister?" You've embarrassed both the heavenly palace of Bishing and Master. I really wonder how 8th Junior has been raising you during all these years. Exian snorted coldly, as if she was extremely displeased with Ming Dong's performance. She lectured him, and even seemingly condemned him. With that, she vanished into thin air, directly ignoring the supreme god kings from the various major organizations. It was as if she only saw Ming Dong. Exian's departure made Jianchen feel relieved. In reality, he felt very unsettled and uneasy when he faced such a powerful expert at such proximity. But fortunately, Exian never paid any attention to him, or direct any particular attention to him during the entire time. She completely treated him as thin air. Perhaps it was because of this that the sword spirits had not been exposed to Exian. This was because he knew that with Exian's supreme cultivation, there was no secret he could hide from her if she checked him seriously. The difference in strength was just too great. They were on completely different levels, so even if he wanted to hide it, he could not. So close. Only now did Jianchen suddenly discover that his forehead was covered in cold sweat. That was how nervous he was earlier. I need to increase my strength as quickly as possible. Personal strength has a direct correlation to everything. The more powerful I become, the better I can hide myself before these supreme experts such that they can't see through all the secrets on me with a single glance. Jianchen's eyes became determined as he secretly made up his mind. Jianchen, here's a divine pill of opaque heavens. It's specially made for healing vitality. At this moment, Ming Dong arrived before Jianchen and passed a thumb-sized pill to him. It's actually a divine pill of opaque heavens. That's a 5th grade god tier pill. It's extremely precious. The surrounding supreme god kings immediately cried out when they saw the pill. Their eyes lit up as they became envious. Clearly, the divine pill of opaque heavens was precious enough to interest them, even with their backgrounds and origins. Only someone as wealthy as the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing could treat a 5th grade god tier pill like it was nothing. There's no need. I have many god tier heavenly resources here. They're no weaker than your divine pill of opaque heavens. Jianchen smiled as he took out some god tier heavenly resources from his space ring. At the same time, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Rui Di, and Ji all took out god tier heavenly resources to recover their expended vitality. Even Shangguan Mu'er possessed god tier pills. Although it was not as great as Ming Dong's divine pill of opaque heavens, it was still extremely precious. Jianchen, these heavenly resources are bitter in taste, and their effects are brutal. It can't be easy to refine them. They're nowhere near as gentle as pills. You better use my pills instead. Shangguan Mu'er passed a jade bottle to Jianchen as her eyes were filled with care. Jianchen chuckled when he heard that. Don't forget about how my cultivation method is special. It might be very difficult for other people to absorb these heavenly resources, but it'll be effortless for me. Alright, everyone heal up quickly. We still have places to go. With that, Jianchen wolfed down his heavenly resources and began to recover. However, his heart weighed heavy with worry right now. He thought of what the Samsaric immortal Exalt had said at the end. I never thought that the real reason why the Taoist sect of Neptunia had been destroyed was because of the Pernite or on the 8th floor. But why did the Samsaric immortal Exalt say that I have to kill Chanlong? He even said that once Chanlong died, the Pernite or would not pose a threat to the Immortals world immediately after it ends up in the hands of people from the Saints world. Perhaps the ultimate weapon that can be created from the Pernite, or is directly related to Chanlong? Or is it because only Chanlong throughout the entire Saints world knows how to use this Pernite, or to forge the ultimate weapon? If that is really the case, it makes sense why the Samsaric immortal Exalt wants me to kill Chanlong. But Chanlong is only a god king right now. Can he really do something that all the Grand Primes and even Grand Exalts of the Saints world can't accomplish? Jianchen recovered as he sank into his thoughts. Suddenly Jianchen shuddered and opened his eyes. He gazed deeply in the direction of the Neptunian mountains as he became surprised and doubtful. The Neptunian mountains, the Grand Exalt's formation. Several million kilometers away, Chanlong and the Python remained on the highest peak of the Neptunian mountains. They had not moved from there. The Neptunian mountains was extremely quiet as if the two were the only ones there. However, it was calm and abundant in energy there. The battle between Exion and the Samsaric immortal Exalt did not reach here. The destroyed landscape filled with violent energy outside made the places seem like two different worlds. Chanlong and the python beside him remained silent. They stared right ahead in shock. The great battle had not affected the Neptunian mountains, but the terrifying disturbance several million kilometers away still frightened them. At this moment, Exion's figure appeared silently outside the boundary of the Neptunian mountains. When she appeared, the light around her was completely withdrawn, revealing her appearance. She wore snow-white clothes and seemed to possess great grace. Her serious face also possessed a unique charm, while her eyes that were profound like galaxies seemed to contain countless interwoven laws, conjuring the truths of the laws of the world. She possessed a supreme dignified sense, as if she had surpassed everything, where she could split the world and change the fate of everything just by talking. She was a supreme existence. However, her face bore some politeness right now. She looked at Chanlong and the soul beside him with mixed feelings and bowed slightly. She said out of utter respect, "Junior Exion greets Senior Ancient Paths." Chanlong and the python looked at each other. They could see the confusion in each other's eyes. They did not know who Exion was, but they could vaguely sense that the woman before them was abnormally terrifying and powerful. However, her current actions were puzzling. Perhaps she could see the bewilderment in Chanlong and the python's eyes, but Exion sighed gently. When the Samsaric immortal Exalt of the Immortals world destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia in the past, Senior fought the Samsaric immortal Exalt. In the end, Senior's soul was shattered into the 3 spiritual souls and 7 animal souls, scattered in various places. Exion glanced at both Chanlong and the python individually and continued, "Now Master only has managed to find one of Senior's spiritual soul and animal soul. Master specially ordered me to come to receive Senior, to invite Senior to the heavenly palace of Bishing, so that Master can assist Senior in recovering as soon as possible. Perhaps Senior still does not know who Senior is, but Master has already located the scattered soul fragments beforehand. Master's abilities are tremendous. Since she has personally taken action, Senior's remaining soul fragment will be found very soon. When all of Senior's soul fragments are gathered together, Senior will truly recover Senior's identity and understand who Senior is." Jianchen arrived on the highest floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace again with Shangguan Mu'er, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Mingdong, Rui Di, and Ji Yi. Upon setting foot on the 12th floor, Jianchen gazed at the 4 statues of Grand Primes that stood in the distance. He sighed emotionally. He could not help but think back to the moment when he had first set foot on the 12th floor. At that time, he had to disguise himself and enter with an extremely low profile to avoid exposing himself. To avoid being identified, he had even avoided the group of people afar. He was nowhere near bold enough to get too close to the 4 statues. But now, when he set foot on the 12th floor again, he had gained a powerful force around him. Not only were there Shui Yunlan and Adriana, 2 outstanding god kings of great power, but there was also Rui Di and Ji Yi, who ranked among the top 10 of the god king's throne. Without a single doubt, a group like this had become the most powerful force in the Neptunian Divine Palace. The number of people on the 12th floor had already decreased. Only a few dozen people sat around the statues. Clearly, these people did not leave the 12th floor, nor did they take part in the fight for the girl. Of course, that did not mean they were not interested in the girl. Instead, they were just realistic, unwilling to contend with the supreme god kings who ranked high up on the god king's throne. However, at this moment, the supreme god kings were extremely weak as well. The power of Samsara had drained away a large amount of their vitality, so they were currently recovering as quickly as they could through various pills and heavenly resources. "Mu'er, you go awaken the artifact spirit of your zither first. I'll have a look nearby and see if I can find the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace." Jianchen stopped before the 4 statues before turning around and talking to Shangguan Mu'er. Shangguan Mu'er nodded and sat down in an empty place. She took out the zither of the demonic cry, controlling it to absorb the mysterious power in the surroundings once again. "We still haven't recovered all of our lost vitality, so we won't be accompanying you. If you need us to take action, just contact us, Rui Di said to Jianchen before finding somewhere nearby to continue recovering with Jiyu. Brother, I'll go recover quickly as well. I just got scolded by my first senior sister, so I think once I leave here, I'll have to face the lecturing of my 8th senior sister as well. Mingdong smiled bitterly. Without a doubt, he had been the most injured out of everyone. If it were not for the large number of god-tier pills on him, he probably would not have been able to survive now. Even if he managed to survive through luck, his cultivation would end up regressing. After all, he had used secret techniques that were far too powerful. He had already surpassed the limit he could endure, severely overcommitting himself. Afterwards, Jianchen left alone. Even Shui Yunlan and Adriana did not go with him. Instead, they remained where they were to recover. The power of Samsara had affected everyone in the Neptunian Divine Palace right now. They had lost a great deal of vitality, preventing them from forming any threat to Jianchen. Moreover, the truly powerful God Kings were all on the 9th floor, so the 12th floor had become extremely safe now. Bang! A million kilometers away from the statues, there was a heavy thud, and a damaged tower covered in sword slashes slammed onto the ground with unimaginable weight. It caused the ground to rumble violently. Xiaoman emerged from the tower. Her big eyes looked around uneasily and eagerly. In the end, they locked onto Jianchen, and her face immediately became filled with worry. She asked in concern, "Brother Jianchen, how are you? Are you fine?" "I'm fine. This is the highest floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace. Xiaoman, hold on to this pendant and see if you can awaken the artifact spirit," said Jianchen. In order to make time, he had only recovered 30% of his vitality before rushing to the 12th floor. So his face was pale and haggard right now. Clearly, he was also weakened. "All right. I'll try right now." Xiaoman took the jade pendant from Jianchen and bit her finger with expertise, dripping blood onto the pendant. The pendant absorbed the blood. However, even after Jianchen and Xiaoman waited for a very long time, they still found no traces of the artifact spirit. Has the artifact spirit already died? Jianchen's heart sank from this. He thought about the artifact spirit's voice that rang out before the Samsaric immortal exalt had appeared. If the artifact spirit was really dead, it would be impossible for Xiaoman to take back the Neptunian Divine Palace with her strength. Let alone Xiaoman. Even if all the God Kings in the Neptunian Divine Palace worked together, they would not be able to obtain the Neptunian Divine Palace. This was because he already knew that the central point of the Neptunian Divine Palace that needed to be refined was in a region that was not open to the public. Apart from gaining the recognition of the artifact spirit, it could only be reached through overcoming the obstructions with absolute strength. With the toughness of a high-quality god artifact, even weaker Grand Primes would not be able to do something like that. Something like that would only be possible if a peak expert like the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing took action. Jianchen frowned heavily. He was out of ideas with the problem he faced right now. "I can sense the presence of Master's bloodline again. Fantastic." Master's descendant didn't die to the hands of Samsaric. At the same time, an excited mental pulse emerged from an unknown region within the Neptunian Divine Palace. A powerful consciousness was tightly entrapped in a huge net completely condensed out of energy there. The ancient consciousness struggled relentlessly as it resisted with its full strength. The net around it actually loosened at a visible rate. The ancient consciousness happened to be the artifact spirit that Jianchen and the others had been searching for the entire time. "I don't know what happened outside, but I can't sense Samsaric's presence anymore. He should have vanished. Since Samsaric is no longer in control, it's impossible for this secret technique to keep me trapped." "Break." The artifact spirit called out, and immediately, a powerful energy surged out. As an arrow, it punched a huge hole in the net, finally allowing the artifact spirit to establish a connection with the Neptunian Divine Palace again. Afterwards, under the artifact spirit's control, the great power of the Neptunian Divine Palace swept out like a tsunami, ripping the net to pieces in an unstoppable manner. "Brother Jianchen, we can't find the artifact spirit, right?" Xiaoman sat on the ground rather powerlessly somewhere on the 12th floor. She supported her chin with her two hands as she looked at Jianchen helplessly. Her pitiful look was heartbreaking. In the past few days, they had gone to many places. Not only did Jianchen travel to everywhere on the 12th floor with Xiaoman, but they even went to the 11th floor. They tried all the methods they could think of in various places to find the artifact spirit, but it all amounted to nothing. It seemed like the method that Xiaoman used to awaken the artifact spirit the first time had become completely useless. Jianchen stood up straight next to Xiaoman, like a sword planted in the ground. Invisible sword intent radiated from his body. At this moment, he stared at the pitch-black sky of the Neptunian Divine Palace. His eyes were very deep as he said gently, "Xiaoman, the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace might have died already." "Humph, who did you say was dead, you little brat?" However, right after Jianchen finished talking, an ancient voice rang out of nowhere. It was filled with great displeasure. The sudden voice immediately alarmed Jianchen. Abruptly, he looked over and saw that a short old man. The old man was only 4 feet tall, and just barely reached up to Jianchen's chest. He had appeared beside Jianchen without any prior signs. His head was slightly raised as he stared at Jianchen angrily. Behind the old man was Xiaoman. Whether it was intentionally or otherwise, the old man just happened to stand between Jianchen and Xiaoman, separating the two of them. "You are?" Jianchen's eyes narrowed as he stared at the old man in shock. That was because he could not sense any presence from the old man at all. He found nothing with the senses of his soul, making the old man an existence that could only be found through sight. Almost instantly, Jianchen realized that the short old man was the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace. "Brat, you better watch yourself next time. If you keep blabbering like that, do you believe that you won't be able to leave the Neptunian Divine Palace ever again? You'll be imprisoned here for the rest of your life." The short old man threatened angrily with a scowl. Jianchen stared at the old man and said nothing. Clearly, he was very surprised that the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace was alive and well. "You didn't die at the hands of the Samsaric Immortal Exalt?" Jianchen only asked in surprise a while later. However, when Jianchen said that, the old man leapt up like a cat that had its tail stepped on. Immediately, he fell down and smacked Jianchen's head. He called out angrily, "You little bastard, what are you saying? Do you know how to talk at all? I'll smack you to death. I'm the supreme ruler in the Neptunian Divine Palace, so how can a clone of that Samsaric old bastard kill me? Little bastard, are you looking down on me or are you pissing me off on purpose?" Jianchen's head was firmly struck by the short old man. He was the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace, so in here, he was a godlike existence. Jianchen could not put up any resistance at all. Fortunately, the old man's slap did not carry any power. Although it struck Jianchen's head firmly, it failed to injure him. "Uncle, are you the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace?" Xiaoman also stood up from the ground. She looked at the old man in joy and surprise. When she stood up, she was actually a head taller than the short old man. The short old man no longer paid any more attention to Jianchen. He looked at Xiaoman and sensed the presence of Xiaoman's bloodline. His expression gradually became mixed, including deep sorrow within. "That's right. I'm the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace." The short old man confirmed his identity. He looked at Xiaoman with extremely mixed feelings and said, "In the past, after the Samsaric Immortal Exalt destroyed the Taoist sect of Neptunia, I fell into a slumber due to my heavy injuries. Even now, I haven't fully recovered. If it were not for Master's bloodline that awakened me, I probably would have slumbered for an even longer time. I just never thought that the Samsaric Immortal Exalt had left a clone of his in the palace back then, so when I awakened a few years ago, I faced the attacks of the Samsaric Immortal Exalt. Originally, he wanted to disperse my consciousness, and then take over the Neptunian Divine Palace. Although the Samsaric Immortal Exalt is powerful as one of the 5 grand exalts of the Immortals world, he only left a clone here. He's dreaming if he wants to disperse my consciousness with a clone," the artifact spirit said. As soon as the Samsaric Immortal Exalt was mentioned, it gritted its teeth in hatred. Xiaoman fell silent. When she heard the artifact spirit mention the Samsaric immortal exalt, she could not help but think of her parents. When she entered the Neptunian divine palace, she learnt that her parents' deaths were closely related to the Samsaric immortal exalt. Your father should be the only grandson of my master. Although my master was an expert who had reached the apex of the saints' world, close to perfection and only second to grand exalts, he had very few descendants. He only had a son and grandson. In the past, when the Samsaric immortal exalt attacked the Taoist sect of Neptunia, only the grandson had been forcefully sent away by master beforehand. He also severed their bloodline connection, allowing him to survive the disaster back then. But the Samsaric immortal exalt is just too powerful. He has grasped the way of karma, so he could use the relationships between the disciples of the Taoist sect of Neptunia to find all the disciples scattered across the entire saints' world effortlessly. His powers of samsara only had to extend along the threads of karma, and no matter how far away they were, they would all die. Master's grandson who had been sent away, your father, had also been found by the Samsaric immortal exalt through his way of karma. Although Master discovered this in time and interfered with the power of laws, forcefully severing all the threads of karma on his grandson from afar, he was still too late. A strand of the Samsaric immortal exalt's power of samsara had already extended out through a thread of karma. The artifact spirit sighed gloomily. He looked at Xiao Man with an extremely mixed expression and said, "You can already imagine the outcome. Although your father was not weak in the past, the difference in cultivation compared to the Samsaric immortal exalt was still too great. Not only did his cultivation regress as he was corroded away by the power of samsara, but he also aged as his life force constantly leaked away. However, since your father could last until then and leave behind you, it really has been a miracle. The Samsaric immortal exalt is one of the 5 grand exalts of the immortals world. Although he only managed to deposit a tiny sliver of power of samsara in your father through Master's intervention, it still should have been impossible for your father to last until then. It looks like someone helped your father in the past." A smear of wonder appeared in the artifact spirit's eyes. Xiao Man had already become tearful when she again heard about how her parents had died. She sobbed as she said through gritted teeth, "My father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather all died because of the Samsaric immortal exalt. He's an evil person, a great, evil person. If I have the ability in the future, I will definitely avenge my parents and my grandfather and great-grandfather that I've never seen. I will personally kill him." At this moment, a seed of hatred had been silently planted in Xiao Man's heart. The Samsaric immortal exalt had killed her entire family, so her hatred towards him had become extremely deep. As Jianchen looked at Xiao Man's hateful gaze, he could not help but think about his earlier encounter with the Samsaric immortal exalt, and how he had passed on his way of karma selflessly. Jianchen sighed inside. He knew that Xiao Man would probably never be able to reach the same level as a grand exalt. Exacting revenge on the Samsaric immortal exalt might have only been a wish for her, where it was completely impossible. However, he did not want to see a seed of hatred being planted in Xiao Man's heart at such a young age either. I wonder if I was right in helping Xiao Man take back the Neptunian divine palace. Jianchen looked at Xiao Man and the artifact spirit silently as he felt mixed inside. However, he showed none of this on his surface, as he was afraid that the artifact spirit who had existed for countless years would see something. The artifact spirit's gaze deepened. His ancient eyes burned with hatred as he said softly, "This revenge must be completed. Although the little master may never be able to become Samsaric's opponent, there are many methods to revenge." The artifact spirit looked at Xiao Man deeply and said, "Let's talk about revenge later. The priority right now is for the little master to gain control over the Neptunian divine palace." "I can gain control over the Neptunian divine palace right now?" Xiao Man asked. She had felt eager and excited to gain control over the Neptunian divine palace before she had learnt the exact reason for her parents' deaths. However, she could not light up no matter what right now. Her heart weighed extremely heavily. The artifact spirit coughed gently and said with hesitation, "About that. Due to the little master being too weak right now, gaining full control of the Neptunian divine palace is impossible. As a result, I can only take the Little Master to the central point, and have the Little Master refine the very basic part of the Neptunian Divine Palace. Once the Little Master has refined the very basic part, you'll be able to move in and out of the Neptunian Divine Palace freely. Of course, the Little Master's current cultivation is nowhere near enough to use the Neptunian Divine Palace against enemies, or to use the power of the Neptunian Divine Palace. After all, you need a cultivation of Chaotic Prime at the very least to gain full control over a high-quality God artifact. Maybe even Grand Prime is required. The artifact spirit looked at Xiao Man, who was nowhere near godhood, helplessly. Probably even he had never considered that the only descendant he had been waiting in slumber for all those years would be so weak. Her level of cultivation could still be described as unfit to be seen. However, the Little Master is still young and has cultivated for far too short of a period, which is why Little Master's cultivation is so low. There are a large amount of resources and various records in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Under my guidance, it won't be difficult for the Little Master's cultivation to increase, thought the artifact spirit. At this moment, Xiao Man could also tell that she was about to leave here. She said to Jianchen gratefully, "Brother Jianchen, I will never forget about the kindness you have shown me. I'll be leaving with the artifact spirit first, and once I've gained a basic grasp over the Neptunian Divine Palace, I'll complete my end of the deal." Xiao Man paused before continuing, "Brother Jianchen, since you're all safe now, please bring out Sister Ziyun." Jianchen glanced at the artifact spirit, and after hesitating slightly, he still took out the Anata Tower in the end and let out Ziyun. The Anata Tower. The artifact spirit's knowledge could not be compared to those supreme god kings. The moment he saw the Anata Tower, he immediately recognized it. Shock filled his face as his gaze towards Jianchen became rather strange. "You little bastard, you sure are blessed. Even the Anata Tower, one of the Anata Grand Prime's 3 great treasures, has ended up in your hands. Although I don't know where you got the Anata Tower from, it's an object of desire, so keeping it won't necessarily bode well. Let me give you a piece of advice. You better return the Anata Tower to the Heavenly Palace of Bishing as soon as possible. As soon as you become interested in keeping it, those majesties from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing will not spare you. Returning it sooner might even benefit you somehow," the artifact spirit said sincerely. With that, the artifact spirit vanished with Xiao Man and Ziyun, leaving Jianchen there alone. Jianchen sighed gently as he looked at the empty space around him. He also left there, directly making his way to the 9th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace. Before long, Jianchen stood outside the Neptunian Mountains. However, when he arrived there again, all he saw was empty land that stretched into the distance. The Neptunian Mountains that originally stood there had completely vanished. "Heya, have a look at where Chanlong is." Jianchen immediately summoned Heya. "Master, I can't sense Chanlong's whereabouts anymore. His soul has either been dispersed, or he has left the Neptunian Divine Palace," said Heya. Jianchen gazed at the empty land and fell silent. At the same time, in a dark, cold, and lonely region of space outside the Neptunian Divine Palace, experts from major clans and organizations across the Saints' world had already gathered. They were all scattered around the entrance of the Neptunian Divine Palace, staring at the structure as they conversed. All of them were primordial realm experts. There were not just a few chaotic primes anymore. With so many of them gathered there, the terrifying presence that permeated the surroundings had distorted space. Even further away, there were countless spaceships. A few people, sometimes more and sometimes less, stood on the decks of each spaceship. They also stared ahead at the Neptunian Divine Palace that stood silently in outer space like a tremendous primordial beast. What has happened inside the Neptunian Divine Palace? Not only has a large number of supreme god kings from the God King's throne died, but a supreme expert even suddenly descended and used her terrifying cultivation to bypass the various formations in the Neptunian Divine Palace, forcing her way in. Just who was that woman who was shrouded in light? Her strength was just too terrifying. With my cultivation as a peak infinite prime, I actually shiver in fear before her. All the primordial realm experts discuss with one another as they felt very perturbed. The formations within the Neptunian Divine Palace are so powerful that they can even stop grand primes. Yet that senior used just a few seconds to get in. Is she a legendary Grand Exalt? What? A Grand Exalt? All the primordial realm experts gathered there were shocked when they heard this. In all of their eyes, Grand Exalts were existences of legends. They were existences that could control the laws of the world, truly making them supreme. She's not a Grand Exalt, but she's close. If I've guessed correctly, she should be the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. An ancient voice rang out. It came from a gray-robed old man who carried a sword on his back. The old man sat on a huge meteor with his eyes closed. His presence was concealed, making him seem like someone ordinary. However, when all the primordial realm experts gathered there looked at the old man, they all revealed fear. Solitary Sword Ancestor, I never thought you'd come as well. At this moment, a great voice boomed through outer space like a great chime. Terrifying sound waves ripped open space, causing huge black cracks to appear in the surroundings. A huge pung that flickered with dazzling azure light shot over from the depths of outer space. He moved at an unbelievable speed as if the concept of distance did not exist before him. He could travel millions of kilometers in a split second. The moment before, he was in the distant depths of space, but in the next moment he had already arrived outside the Neptunian Divine Palace. He was so fast that it seemed like he could teleport. Azure Pung King. The old man on the meteor opened his eyes as looked at the gigantic azure pung that had wings that could shroud the skies. The Azure Pung King had arrived in his original form. His original form was just like his title. He was a gigantic azure pung. All of his feathers flickered with azure light, and seemed to be as tough as the scales of dragons. A powerful and terrifying energy pulsed within. He hovered in space silently, just like a huge meteor. Even the majestic Neptunian Divine Palace was not a tenth of the Azure Pung King's size. Heavens, I never thought that the person on the meteor was the legendary Solitary Sword Ancestor. Not only has the Solitary Sword Ancestor come personally, but even the famed Azure Pung King has arrived, coupled with the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing, who entered the Neptunian Divine Palace. Just what has happened in there this time? It has raised the attention of so many experts. The primordial realm experts gathered there all engaged in a hot discussion. The presence of the Solitary Sword Ancestor and the Azure Pung King had attracted the attention of many. At the same time, they all felt curious about what had happened in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Of course, many of them had extremely ugly expressions. They had already confirmed through the God King's throne that the prodigies their clans had nurtured with so much effort, their future pillars of support, had died in the Neptunian Divine Palace. It was heartbreaking for them. At this moment, the Azure Pung King's colossal body rapidly shrunk, and he turned into a middle-aged man in azure robes. His gaze was sharp, and his sculpted facial features were filled with a sense of supremacy. Originally, the Azure Pung King and the Solitary Sword Ancestor were several tens of thousand kilometers apart. However, the Azure Pung King moved slightly, and he appeared before the Solitary Sword Ancestor like he had teleported. He did not set foot on the Solitary Sword Ancestor's meteor. Instead, he looked at him from several hundred kilometers away. To supreme experts like them, let alone a few hundred kilometers, even thousands of kilometers would be like inches away. Solitary Sword Ancestor, has your successor also died in the Neptunian Divine Palace? The Azure Pung King asked forcefully, giving off an undisguisable sense of unruliness. The Solitary Sword Ancestor did not move at all from where he sat on the meteor. His gaze remained calm as his expression did not change at all. That's right. My Solitary Sword lineage never had a lot of people. It's difficult to find a single suitable successor, even when I scour the Saints' world. It's also exactly because of this that when my lineage was at its peak in history, there were still no more than 5 people. Now at my generation, I only managed to find Gong Zheng as the only successor, but he died in the Neptunian Divine Palace. I've come exactly to understand how Gong Zheng had died. I'd like to see the junior of which organization disrespected my Solitary Sword lineage, even going as far as to kill the only successor I found after so much difficult. Although the Solitary Sword Ancestor spoke calmly, All the primordial realm experts gathered there subconsciously shivered inside. Clearly, the solitary sword ancestors in different words were filled with intense killing intent. This king's disciple died in the Neptunian divine place as well. He was the disciple that delighted this king the most. This king held extremely high expectation for him, but this king never thought he would be killed in the Neptunian divine palace. The Azure Pung king's face became extremely sunken. Killing intent filled his eyes, and the surrounding space collapsed from his powerful presence. There's still some time before the Neptunian divine palace closes, and the opening this time is different. The awakening of the artifact spirit might draw out this time. This king is unwilling to wait this long. Solitary sword ancestor, why don't the two of us work together and force our way in? The Azure Pung king suggested. The solitary sword ancestor stared at the Neptunian divine palace deeply. He shook his head. You completely understand how powerful the Neptunian divine palace is. It's very difficult for just the two of us to force our way in. Even if we do succeed, it'll probably take a decade. The people in the Neptunian divine palace would have come out long ago by then. Moreover, the Blood-Tier Grand Exalt did say that unless the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace took a master willingly, no one would be able to take the Neptunian divine palace, nor can anyone force their way in. If you really do that, the Blood-Tier Grand Exalt would probably arrive personally before you've managed to make your way in. After all, we're not the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing, said the solitary sword ancestor. The real reason why no one dared to eye the Neptunian divine palace for such a long time in the saints' world was because of the Blood-Tier Grand Exalt's warning. The Azure Pung king's eyes immediately narrowed when he heard that. The name of the Blood-Tier Grand Exalt clearly formed an impressive deterrence. Even the obstinate and unruly Azure Pung king showed deep fear when he heard the Blood-Tier Grand Exalt's name. Although the Grand Exalts of the saints' world rarely interfered with these matters, once they said something, it would represent the will of the heavens, just like an imperial edict. It was truly held supreme, where no one dared to disobey. This is the murderer of this king's successor. May this king ask if anyone recognizes which organization he comes from. There's still some time before the Neptunian divine palace opens, so this king will go pay a visit to the organization behind him first. The Azure Pung king said frigidly as undisguised killing intent radiated from him. He extended a finger and the space before him seemed to become a mirror, displaying a scene where Jianchen was being hunted down by the many supreme god kings. However, with all the people obscuring the surroundings, there was not a single trace of Jianchen in the scene. Moreover, aside from a pale-faced, haggard young man, everyone else was blurred. At this moment, the pale-faced, haggard young man stabbed out with his sword. The scene ended there. It was quite obvious that this was what Mo Chung had seen the moment before his death. The Azure Pung king used a unique secret technique to completely project what Mo Chung saw before his death. All the primordial realm experts gathered there shook their heads. None of them knew who Mo Cheng's murderer was or where he came from. Even some people who specialized in dealing with information had never seen or heard of this person. The Azure Pung king's face was ugly. Since it only showed the scene before Mo Cheng's death, he only saw the appearance of Mo Cheng's murderer. He had no idea about how the murderer's presence was like. None of the primordial realm experts gathered there recognized the murderer of Mo Chung, who was the disciple of the Azure Pung king. Among the many spaceships parked behind the primordial realm experts, a veiled, slender woman stood on the deck of one of the spaceships. From far away, she could also see the scene that the Azure Pung king had conjured through his secret technique. However, when she saw Mo Cheng's murderer, her body immediately trembled gently. She said softly, "Why is it him?" The woman spoke extremely softly, basically as loudly as a mosquito. However, the Azure Pung king had been paying close attention to the surroundings. Even from very far away, he could clearly hear what the woman had murmured without even using the senses of his soul due to his current level of cultivation. With a flash, the Azure Pung king traveled the great distance and appeared on the woman's spaceship like he had teleported. "You recognize this person?" The Azure Pung king stared at the veiled woman coldly as a terrifying pressure surged out, causing the spaceship to totter. Countless formations flashed, unleashing the defenses of the spaceship. However, even when the spaceship had activated its formations, the Azure Pung King's pressure was still enough to make people feel like they would shatter. Senior Pung King, please do not be angry. This is the princess of our Thousand Lotus Empire, Yin Xiaoyan. Please do not make things difficult for the sake of our Thousand Lotus ancestor, Senior Pung King. An old woman appeared before the veiled woman in a flash as she said submissively. She was also a primordial realm expert, but she was only an infinite prime. This king doesn't care whether you're from the Thousand Lotus Empire or the 10,000 Lotus Empire. This king has asked you whether you recognize the murderer of this king's disciple? The Azure Pung King's face was cold as he glared at the veiled Yin Xiaoyan. He did not take the Thousand Lotus Empire seriously at all. Yin Xiaoyan greets Senior Pung King. It's just that Senior has misunderstood. I do not recognize this person, nor do I know about this person's origins. Yin Xiaoyan bowed towards the Azure Pung King with difficulty under the tremendous pressure. Do you think this king is easy to fool? The Azure Pung King snorted coldly as his eyes shone in a frightening manner. At the same time, the spaceship that Yin Xiaoyan stood on trembled violently, and with a few muffled explosions, the Azure Pung King crushed quite a few defensive formations on the spaceship to pieces. The quality of Yin Xiaoyan's spaceship was impressive, and the defensive formations were of high grades as well. They could easily block attacks from infinite primes, yet they were like toys before the Azure Pung King. Tell this king everything you know about this person. This king has many methods to obtain what this king wants from you. So you better not force this king to use them, the Azure Pung King said coldly. Killing intent wrapped around him, causing the surrounding space to seemingly become icy cold. Whether it was the infinite prime old woman, or the veiled Yin Xiaoyan, they both paled under the pressure of the Azure Pung King. Senior Pung King, you are someone of high status. Yet you would stoop as low as to harass a woman that's only a god king. If this makes it out, it'll probably damage Senior Pung King's renown. At this moment, a gentle woman's voice rang out. A woman with an otherworldly presence appeared on the spaceship out of nowhere. She was in a red dress. Her beauty was enough to outshine the moon. But she clearly kept her presence concealed, so she seemed ordinary right now. She faced the Azure Pung King calmly. The Azure Pung King's face sank slightly when he saw the woman. He said, "It looks like it's the 8th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. But what of it? Does the 8th Majesty plan on sticking her nose in matters that don't concern her?" Immediately, the surrounding primordial realm experts all gazed over when they heard that the 8th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing was present. Even the solitary sword ancestor who sat on the meteor could not help but pay attention as well. Earlier, the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing had forced her way into the Neptunian Divine Palace, as if she possessed supreme power. How unstoppable she seemed had deeply shocked everyone present. As a result, even though the junior of the First Majesty, the 8th Majesty, had not neared the peak of cultivation yet, she still struck fear in the hearts of everyone due to the glory of the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. Senior Pung King has misunderstood. I just happened to have some things that I wanted to ask Yin Xiaoyan as well. I wonder if Senior would mind? The 8th Majesty smiled gently. Although she had asked for the Azure Pung King's opinion, she did not wait for him to reply. She just turned around and said to Yin Xiaoyan, "Yin Xiaoyan, would you mind paying a visit to my divine hall?" As she said that, she seemed like she was about to take Yin Xiaoyan away. The 8th Majesty's invitation startled both Yin Xiaoyan and the old woman. 8th Majesty, do you really think you can do whatever you want because you have the support of your first senior, and that you don't have to take this king seriously at all?" The Azure Pung King said with a sunken face. If it were not for the fact that he feared the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, he would have never allowed a chaotic prime to act arrogantly before him. Senior Pung King, if you want to find the murderer of your disciple, you are more than welcome to wait for him to come out of the Neptunian Divine Palace. Why must you cause trouble for innocent people? Yin Xiaoyan, let's go. The 8th Majesty took Yin Xiaoyan with her as she looked at the Azure Pung King with a murderous gaze. Yin Xiaoyan, I want to learn about what happened in the Neptunian Divine Palace. You can tell me everything you experienced. In a Majesty Divine Hall, the 8th Majesty sat on a piece of jade as she looked at Yun Xiaoyan. Don't tell me that you never entered the Neptunian Divine Palace. Although you haven't come out of the Neptunian Divine Palace, there are some matters that you can't hide from me. Yun Xiaoyan's face became bitter when she heard that. She knew that the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bixing were all people of great ability. They knew many ancient and powerful secret techniques, allowing them to see through many secrets. Even when she wanted to hide things from people like them, she probably would not have the ability. They would even be able to tell if she was lying or not. 8th Majesty, although a clone of mine did enter the Neptunian Divine Palace, she died before long. As a result, Yun Xiaoyan does not know much about what happened in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Yun Xiaoyan did not dare to hide anything from the 8th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing. She told her everything she knew, including what happened with Mingdong. Mingdong sure shone brightly in the Neptunian Divine Palace. However, I can tell that your threat of karma with Mingdong is not as simple as grievances. Your primary body has hurried over from the distant Thousand Lotus Empire, probably for Mingdong as well, right? The 8th Majesty said. Chapter 2170. Successor of the Third Ancestor. It looks like I can't hide anything from the 8th Majesty. Yun Xiaoyan became extremely polite. Before the highly esteemed 8th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing, she appeared to be extremely cautious. Even though she was the princess of the Thousand Lotus Empire, possessing great status, she was unable to face the 8th Majesty with composure. Outside the Neptunian Divine Palace, the Azure Peng King still did not give up on his search for information on Mo Cheng's murderer. He had always been an extremely sensitive person, and was unruly. There was an almost feral amount of cruelty hidden within him. Now that Mo Cheng, who he placed high hopes on, had died, he had the urge to find the organization behind the murderer to settle the debt. However, after groups of God Kings emerged from the Neptunian Divine Palace one after another, the Azure Peng King finally learnt that the name of his disciple's murderer was Mingdong. Mingdong's connection with the Heavenly Palace of Bixing had only been revealed at the very end, while the God Kings who had come out just now had left early. They had no idea that the 5 experts who followed Mingdong were divine generals from the Heavenly Palace of Bixing. As a result, the Azure Peng King learnt of nothing apart from his name. Mingdong, good. Very good. This king doesn't care who you are, as this king won't let you leave alive for killing this king's disciple. And how dare the organization behind you give you permission to act so recklessly in the Neptunian Divine Palace? Once I understand your background, I will definitely pay a personal visit to the organization behind you. The Azure Peng King's cold voice rang out. Chilling killing intent almost seemed to make the space there seize up. However, no one knew whether he would still be bold enough to talk so big in such a fearless manner, once he learnt that Mingdong was the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bixing. Near the 4 Grand Prime statues on the 12th floor of the Neptunian Divine Palace, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Mingdong Rui Di, and Ji Yi all remained seated like statues. They devoted themselves to recovering their vitality. But at this moment, a single and light zither sound suddenly rang out. The pleasant sound seemed to be filled with endless char, as if it could pierce through all obstructions and be heard clearly from everywhere. There were several dozen God Kings recovering on the 12th floor as well. Many of them had cast down layers of formation around them, but the zither sound managed to pierce through the formations effortlessly, alarming everyone there. At that moment, all the people there opened their eyes and stared at the same place. Shangguan Mu'er sat there in a purple dress with her eyes closed. All 36 strings of the zither of the demonic cry across her knees actually leapt about without anyone's control, playing the wondrous music. As the music rang out, it seemed to bear the laws of the world, possessing a profound charm of laws. It could also enchant the minds of people. In just 5 seconds, everyone, Shui Yunlan included, seemed to have become intoxicated. The music had sucked away their souls unknowingly, causing their minds to sink into the music. It was also at this moment that a single inscription flashed between Mingdong's eyebrows. Mingdong roused in that instance after having his mind drawn away. Sister-in-law. Ming Dong called out as he stared at Shangguan Mu'er in surprise. Don't worry, Shangguan Mu'er opened her eyes slowly and said calmly. Afterwards, she gently pressed her slender, white hands against the strings. Immediately, the strings that leapt about by themselves stopped, and so did the enchanting music. This is the 2 tunes of the demonic and divine engraved within Zither of the demonic cry. I just wanted to check out the power of the 2 tunes. It won't harm anyone here, said Shangguan Mu'er as her enchanting eyes were filled with undisguised surprise and joy. She had finally awakened the artifact spirit slumbering within the Zither of the demonic cry. She had already gained the basic recognition of the Zither of the demonic cry back in the lower world. So she had used the Zither for many years now. Now that the artifact spirit had awakened, it naturally did not to object her at all. It treated her as the only successor of the 3rd ancestor, and accepted her as its master extremely successfully. This is the legendary 2 tunes of the demonic and divine? No wonder it's terrifying. It actually managed to control my mind unknowingly. Shui Yunlan returned to her senses, and her emotionless eyes were filled with seriousness. Adriana also stared at the Zither of the demonic cry in surprise. She said gently, the records of our God clan have detailed that when the 3rd ancestor of the Taoist sect of divine sound personally plays the divine tune, she can invoke the mysteries of the world, and allow people to connect with the laws of the world such that comprehension becomes hundreds of times easier than usual. Moreover, it can heal wounds of the soul, making it extremely profound. With the demonic tune, she could throw laws into disarray, reverse yin and yang, and control the souls of grand primes. The 2 tunes of the demonic and divine was the most terrifying technique of the Taoist sect of divine sound in the past. I never thought you'd grasp it now. Rui Di and Ji stared at Shangguan Mu'er in surprise. Due to how short the sect of dragons and phoenixes had been around for, they did not know about the rumors of the 3rd ancestor as well as Shui Yunlan or Adriana. However, having become temporarily lost earlier, they were extremely shocked. Mu'er, has the artifact spirit of the Zither of the demon cry awakened? Jianchen also rushed back and stared at Shangguan Mu'er happily. Yeah. On this floor, there's some soul energy that has never dispersed. Once the artifact spirit absorbed enough of this power, it awakened. Shangguan Mu'er smiled faintly. She looked at the surroundings and said, only once the artifact spirit awakened did I learn that the soul energy came from the ancestor of the Taoist sect of Neptunia, that was only second to Grand Exalts. His soul was wiped out, but perhaps because the Neptunian divine palace had been sealed off, or perhaps due to some other reasons, a tiny portion of his soul energy lingered on this floor. Jianchen was surprised when he heard that. Immediately, he covered up Shangguan Mu'er's mouth. Now that the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace had awakened, if he learnt that the Zither of the demonic cry was absorbing the residual soul energy of his old master, no one knew what would happen. However, Jianchen had already secretly communicated with the sword spirits in an attempt for them to absorb the soul energy there to recover their powers, just like how the artifact spirit of the Zither of the demonic cry had awakened. Due to the special characteristics of the Zither of the demon cry, it can absorb the soul energy here, but we can't. We can't even sense the soul energy here properly. The sword spirit said helplessly. Pity filled Jianchen's face. If the sword spirits could recover some of their power through the soul energy here, the assistance that they could bring him in the future would be immeasurable. After a moment of hesitance, Jianchen looked at everyone and said, the artifact spirit has already broken free, and Xiao Man will successfully become the new master of the Neptunian Divine Palace. I think we can leave here very soon. Jianchen, what do you plan on doing next? Adriana asked. She did not care about who the Neptunian Divine Palace belonged to, as she had only come here under the orders of the war god. Jianchen, come with me back to the heavenly palace of Bishing. My 8th senior is outside, and my 1st senior just showed herself earlier. As long as you come with me, I can guarantee you that no matter how many people you've offended in the Neptunian Divine Palace, they won't be able to do anything to you, said Ming Dong. He also did not seem to care about the Neptunian Divine Palace. Shui Yunlan remained silently. Currently, she struggled to even protect herself, where she could not even leave through the main entrance of the Neptunian Divine Palace. She was of no help at all at a time like this. Rui Di and Ji also said nothing. Although Jianchen came from the same homeland as them, Jianchen had offended far too many people in the Neptunian Divine Palace. The heritage of their sect of dragons and phoenixes was shallow, so they were completely unable to provide any help to Jianchen. Mingdong, I have my own path that I must take. I'll leave the Neptunian Divine Palace through the teleportation formation here. Jianchen turned down Mingdong's invitation. He had his own pride and dignity. He did not want to rely on others. Moreover, he had the sword spirits with him, so he did not dare to go to the heavenly palace of Bishing. Moore, you better return to the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. Don't go to the cloud plane for now. Staying at the Taoist sect of Divine Sound instead will help you substantially. Jianchen then said to Shangguan Moore. He also understood that he could not to take Shangguan Moore with him with the situation he currently faced. Chapter 2171. The End of a Journey. I'll continue to cultivate in the Taoist sect of Divine Sound for a while. Although the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry has awakened now, allowing me to complete my inheritance of the third ancestor's legacy, there are still various notes that the third ancestor has left behind in the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. They'll provide me with quite a lot of assistance. Shangguan Moore looked at Jianchen, and worry filled her enchanting eyes. She said, "You've created such a great disturbance in the Neptunian Divine Palace. And it's also because of you that all the Supreme God Kings lost their only chance at obtaining the Neptunian Divine Palace. There must be a lot of people outside who have memorized you, so your future journey will definitely be very difficult. You need to be careful." Jianchen smiled without minding too much. "Moore, don't worry. I won't die that easily. Oh right, here's a cosmic movement talisman. Keep it for a crucial time. It can save your life. You better take it." Jianchen passed a cosmic movement talisman to Shangguan Moore. "It's actually a cosmic movement talisman. Where did you get it from?" Adriana, Rui Di, and Ji were all surprised when they heard Jianchen mention this talisman. The cosmic movement talisman is a god-tier talisman. It can ignore any obstructions in space or formations. It's said that it's possible to even escape from grand primes with a cosmic movement talisman, explained Shui Yunlan. Shangguan Moore understood the value of the cosmic movement talisman from the explanation. She could not help but become touched as she declined the talisman. She said caringly, "Jianchen, you better keep it for yourself. You need it more than me. I have more on me. You have to accept this no matter what. I'll also be at ease if I know you have a talisman that can save your life on you," Jianchen said firmly, leaving no room for discussion. "All right then. I'll accept this cosmic movement talisman for now. But don't forget, we promised Xiao Bao in the past that we'd go and get him within 10,000 years. Shangguan Moore looked at Jianchen deeply. Jianchen could not help but think about his child who was waiting for his return on the Tianyuan continent, once Xiao Bao was mentioned. He also thought about Yu Yu, Huang Wuan, his relatives, and his brothers. Reminiscence flooded out from his heart. At this moment, Jianchen and his group suddenly felt the landscape around them change. They had abruptly been taken to the 12th floor by a mysterious power. They had appeared in a huge cave that seemed ancient. The sudden occurrence immediately alarmed everyone. They became cautious. "Don't worry, it's the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace," said Jianchen. "Only the artifact spirit that controlled everything could do something like this in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Brother Jianchen." Xiaoman's voice rang out from nearby. She and the artifact spirit, the 4-foot-tall old man, appeared beside Jianchen silently. She looked at Jianchen happily. The artifact spirit, on the other hand, studied Mingdong with his small eyes. He also glanced at the 5 divine generals behind Mingdong from time to time. The light in his eyes flickered as he seemed to be thinking of something. "Xiaoman, you succeeded?" Jianchen looked at Xiaoman with a smile. Xiaoman nodded happily. "I've already gained a basic grasp over the Neptunian Divine Palace. Brother Jianchen, do you know that I now feel like I've become a part of the Neptunian Divine Palace? I can sense its changes at all times. It's an extremely wondrous feeling." It's just that I heard from the artifact spirit that I still have a very long way to go before I can fully control the Neptunian Divine Palace on my own. Alright. Artifact spirit, bring me all the legacies in the Neptunian Divine Palace. This is my deal with Brother Jianchen, Xiao Man said to the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit nodded. He had already heard about this from Xiao Man, so he immediately reached out and closed his hand. Immediately, all the formations and restrictions around the legacies that the primordial realm experts had left behind shattered at the same time. The various legacies that had existed there for millions of years all vanished at that moment. When the legacies appeared again, they all floated before the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit was basically omnipotent in the Neptunian Divine Palace. He could control the powers of the Neptunian Divine Palace as he wished. Unless he encountered an existence that possessed power beyond the Neptunian Divine Palace, a high-quality god artifact, nothing could escape from him. As a result, the various formations from chaotic primes and the even weaker infinite primes were useless before the artifact spirit. There's a total of 5 chaotic prime legacies and 18 infinite prime legacies. Since it's the Little Master's orders, you can have these legacies, the artifact spirit said. He looked at the various legacies that hovered before him with a mixed expression. Jianchen did not hold back, accepting all the legacies that were basically enough to make everyone green with envy. These legacies were presented in different forms. Some of them were space rings, some were sculptures, while others were presented as a stream of consciousness, stored within multicolored beads. Without a single exception, all of the legacies came with a space ring. Rui Di Ji, according to our agreement, these belong to you. Jianchen handed 30% of the legacies to Rui Di and Ji. This was what they had agreed on. Looking at a chaotic prime's legacy and multiple infinite prime's legacies hovering before them, Rui Di and Ji were very tempted, but they did not accept it immediately. Instead, they hesitated. In the end, Rui Di and Ji only took an infinite prime's legacy each. They said, actually, we haven't been a lot of help. If we really take 30%, we'll be guilt-ridden. As a result, Ji and I will just take a single infinite prime's legacy each. If it were not for the fact that the sect of dragons and tigers is lacking in heritage and requires these items, the two of us would have never accepted anything, Ji said rather helplessly. After accepting the items, Rui Di and Ji bid farewell and left. Soon afterwards, Adriana left as well. She hurried back to the God clan to report to the war god about what had happened in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Brother, since you don't want to return to the heavenly palace of Bishing, I won't force you to. I'll be going to the cloud plane next to have a look at the Tian Yuan clan you founded. Is there any messages you want me to bring to them? Mingdong asked. Jianchen hesitated slightly before passing all the legacies he had obtained from the Neptunian Divine Palace to Mingdong. Then he took out some god-tier heavenly resources from his space ring and said, "Take these to the Tian Yuan clan, and see if any of them are suitable for these legacies." All right. You don't have to worry then. I know how to approach this matter. I'll stay in the clan for a while when I go this time, so you don't need to worry about the safety of the Tian Yuan clan. With my identity as the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, protecting a single clan is nothing difficult, Mingdong promised. He did indeed possess that right and confidence with his current identity. After he learned of Mingdong's identity, even the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace was surprised. He thought, and I had thought that this person was a disciple of a majesty from the heavenly palace of Bishing. I never thought he'd be the 9th majesty. In the past, the heavenly palace of Bishing only had 8 majesties. These 8 majesties were the direct disciples of the Anata Grand Exalt. In reality, only the direct disciples of the Anata Grand Exalt can be referred to as majesties. Since this person has been referred to as the 9th majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing, he should also be a direct disciple of the Anata Grand Exalt. The artifact spirit glanced at Mingdong deeply and showed prudence that rarely appeared. He turned his head toward Xiaoman and said secretly, "Little Master, this person called Mingdong has an extraordinary identity. You better use this rare opportunity to develop ties with him." His master is extremely impressive. Out of the 7 grand exalts of the saints' world, the Anata Grand Exalt is an existence that ranks within the top 3. He's renowned and only second to the war god from the god clan. But I don't know him, replied Xiaoman. She had no idea what to do. The artifact spirit had perfectly concealed what she said, so despite her strength, none of the god kings heard her. Brother, take care. Don't forget that we still have to go back to the Tianyuan continent together and visit our homeland. I'll be waiting for your return. Mingdong bid farewell to Jianqin and left with the 5 divine generals. Afterwards, Shangguan Mu'er also bid farewell to Jianqin reluctantly and left the Neptunian divine palace. Now that the Neptunian divine palace had a master, and Jianqin was about to leave through the teleportation formation, there was no reason for them to remain any longer, so they all bid farewell. In the blink of an eye, everyone was gone. Only Jianqin and Shui Yunlan remained there. Brother Jianqin, will you be leaving too? Xiaoman could not help but ask as she saw Jianqin stand there all by himself. She was reluctant for him to leave. Jianqin sighed deeply and dismissed his empty emotions. He looked at Xiaoman and said, "That's right, I'll be leaving too. Xiaoman, please let us borrow the teleportation formation in your Neptunian divine palace." Brother Jianqin, just stay in the Neptunian divine palace and cultivate. The artifact spirit said that there are still a lot of resources in here. It'll be very safe for you to cultivate here, and Sister Ziyun will be here as well. Xiaoman urged Jianqin to stay. She seemed to be pleading him. As she was still young and naive, she still believed that Jianqin held feelings for Ziyun. Xiaoman's urgings immediately displeased the artifact spirit greatly. Without asking for Xiaoman's permission, he controlled the power of the Neptunian divine palace and moved Jianqin and Shui Yunlan to the teleportation formation. He said, "This is the teleportation formation, but where you get transported to is random. The only thing I can guarantee is that it'll be absolutely safe. Now go." The artifact spirit seemed to be afraid that Jianqin would remain behind. Jianqin smiled faintly and declined Xiaoman's urgings. He entered the teleportation formation with Shui Yunlan and vanished from the Neptunian divine palace. He did not ask about the Pernite or the Samsaric immortal exalt had mentioned. First of all, the Pernite ore was terrifyingly hot. Even when he could last a few seconds at the bottom of the lava now, he still could not collect the Pernite ore again. Moreover, the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace had awakened. It definitely knew the importance of the Pernite ore, so it would never let him get a single piece of it. "Little master, you're far too naive. Fortunately, I held back and didn't give all the legacies to that little bastard. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been just a great loss for us. But even with just the tiny portion he has taken, and the fact that they're weaker legacies, he has still had it easy." The artifact spirit immediately sniggered after Jianqin and Shui Yunlan had left. He seemed like an old scheming rascal as over another dozen primordial realm legacies appeared before him. The primordial realm experts from various organizations waited anxiously outside the Neptunian divine palace. Many of their faces were filled with worry, and some of them had even paled from anger. "Is Zhu Wen's name still on the God King's throne?" An illusionary old man descended on a huge spaceship and asked in a dignified manner. "Great Elder, young Master Zhu's name remains on the God King's throne. It has not vanished," a few middle-aged men said politely before the illusionary old man. "Fantastic. Zhu Wen is the most outstanding descendant of our ancient Zhu clan in almost 1,000,000 years. He carries the heavy hopes of revitalizing the clan. We can't let any accidents happen to him. I'll leave my clone right here. I want to personally witness him emerge from the Neptunian divine palace alive. Is the young lady's name still on the God King's throne?" A husky, old voice rang out on another spaceship for the umpteenth time. "Patriarch, the young lady's name is still on the God King's throne. I hope that Ruedi and Ji Yi can emerge safely." Something similar rang out from a dragon-shaped spaceship. The person who said this was a ruddy old man. He seemed ordinary, but he also seemed dignified. He was called Rueda, one of the elders of the sect of dragons and phoenixes. He was also one of the most powerful members in the sect right now, a peak chaotic prime. If I had known that something so severe would happen in the Neptunian Divine Palace, I would have never sent in Ruedi and Ji back then. They're the clansmen with the greatest talent and highest potential ever since our sect of dragons and phoenixes has been founded. It's extremely likely for them to become grand primes in the future, which would allow our sect of dragons and phoenixes to truly stand among the ranks of peak organizations. Similar scenes occurred in many places. Clearly, many large organizations were worried about the supreme god kings who were still alive. There were many people with high status among these god kings, and some of them even held the hopes of their clan rising up. However, at this moment, a great power suddenly pulsed at the entrance of the Neptunian Divine Palace, and a great group of people appeared out of nowhere. These people were god kings at most, and almost all of them were pale-faced and haggard, where it was possible to tell that they were extremely frail from a single glance. They were the supreme god kings who had survived in the end. Most of them remained seated, clearly still recovering. They had no clue that they had already left the Neptunian Divine Palace. Only when the coldness of outer space surged over did they become alarmed. They opened their eyes and were all stunned. What has happened? Why have I suddenly appeared outside? Many supreme god kings were confused as to what had happened. They're out. They're all out. At the same time, an uproar erupted in the dark, lonely space. All the experts who had been waiting for quite some time surged over. I never thought the artifact's spirit would directly send me outside. Hehe, saved me the effort of traveling. Mingdong also happened to be among the god kings who had been sent out. He had been making his way towards the first floor with the 5 divine generals, but in the end, he had been sent away by the Neptunian Divine Palace's power when he had just left the 9th floor. Let's go and find my 8th senior. I want to go to the cloud plane, and I need my 8th senior to send me some more powerful divine generals. Haha, I wonder how that little tiger is like after all these years now. And newbies, that proud snake. Mingdong laughed. Clearly, he was extremely happy. You're Mingdong? My disciple's murderer? At this moment, an extremely heavy killing intent swept out, causing space to tremble and shatter as countless stars flickered. Mingdong's face suddenly changed. The killing intent targeted him. Just from it shooting over from afar, his blood froze, and he felt like his body was about to be ripped apart. He could not resist at all. Mingdong looked over, and all he saw before him was a middle-aged man in azure robes. He had appeared silently as he stared at Mingdong resentfully. Mingdong could sense a terrifying presence that was as great as a tsunami from the man. Not only did his feet and hands grow cold before the presence while his body experienced chills, but he also could not move at all under the terrifying pressure. The 5 divine generals behind Mingdong all gritted their teeth. They wanted to equip their hidden armor, but under the man's presence, even such a simple action became extremely difficult. They were truly as puny as ants before this man. They could not even flee. Unsurprisingly, the middle-aged man in azure robes was the Azure Pung King. When the Azure Pung King blocked Mingdong, figures constantly flickered in the surroundings. Primordial realm experts appeared like they had teleported over, taking away their supreme god kings safely in fear that they would become a casualty to what was about to happen. Many primordial realm experts also glanced at Mingdong sympathetically. In their eyes, Mingdong's fate was set in stone since he had offended the Azure Pung King. At that moment, all the surviving supreme god kings were taken away, only leaving Mingdong and the 5 divine generals there. It was not that they did not want to leave. Rather, the Azure Pung King's pressure had completely immobilized them. They could not leave even when they wanted to. Blood oozed out from the corner of Mingdong's lips. He had not recovered completely yet, and coupled with the impact from the powerful presence, he immediately showed signs of weakness. He felt like he was being ripped apart. Since my disciple Mo Chung died to your hands, you will die as well, no matter where you come from, the Azure Pung King said coldly. The disciple he treated with the greatest importance and held extremely high hopes for had died to Mingdong's hands. So he naturally hated Mingdong very much. He did not want to take Mingdong's life so easily. He had already made up his mind to torture Mingdong in the most brutal manner first. What a temper, Pung King! At this moment, a gentle and extremely pleasant voice rang out. The eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing strode over gently in her red dress. Her steps were not hurried, but she traveled a great distance with every step. She appeared before Mingdong like she had teleported. With the eighth majesty's arrival, Mingdong immediately felt the tremendous presence vanish. As he felt relieved, he also experienced a wave of weakness, and he almost collapsed. Do you plan on being nosy again? The Azure Pung King's face sank as he glared at the eighth majesty. Fury rose up. Previously, he had allowed the eighth majesty to take away Yun Xiaoyan out of respect for the first majesty. However, when he faced the murderer of his disciple now, the eighth majesty actually planned on intervening again. This made his face darken. They're from our heavenly palace of Bishing. Does Senior Pung King plan on becoming enemies with the heavenly palace of Bishing? Please consider that carefully, Senior Pung King, the eighth majesty said calmly, but she had already used a unique secret technique to call into the distance. First senior sister. What? Mingdong is actually from the heavenly palace of Bishing? No wonder he's bold enough to even kill the disciple of the Azure Pung King. As it turns out, he has the heavenly palace of Bishing's support. The eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing has stood forward. Who knows what the Azure Pung King will do? The Azure Pung King is infamous. He's not a person that can be reasoned with. Coupled with his Azure Pung movement technique, his speed is almost unmatched. He's not someone that can be provoked easily. Even across the entire Saints world, there are not a lot of people who would disrespect the Azure Pung King. In the distance, the primordial realm experts who did not care about Mingdong originally began to pay close attention after the eighth majesty's appearance. They all glanced between the Azure Pung King and the eighth majesty as they showed interest. One of them was an infamous despot of the Saints world, while the other was the eighth majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Both sides possess great backgrounds, which made all the primordial realm experts eager to see whether the two of them would clash. He has killed the disciple that I take the most pride in. The eighth majesty should understand this king's temperament. Does the eighth majesty really plan on protecting this person? The Azure Pung King was emotionless as his presence erupted like a burst dam. It caused the stars to dim as space collapsed. He stood in a spatial crack that constantly collapsed and healed up as he stared at the eighth majesty coldly. He showed no intention of backing down. He really is the Azure Pung King. He's so unruly that even the heavenly palace of Bishing can't deter him. Although the Azure Pung King is nowhere close to being invincible in terms of strength, his speed is basically unmatched. It's true that everyone else in the heavenly palace of Bishing can no longer deter the Azure Pung King anymore aside from the first majesty. If he insists on fleeing, no one can stop him. Many primordial realm experts discuss with each other secretly. Many of them looked at the Azure Pung King with deep fear and dread. So you are Mo Cheng's master. Azure Pung King, the Neptunian Divine Palace is a place filled with competition. The only thing you can blame for your disciple's death is that he wasn't strong enough. It's no one else's fault. Don't you find it shameful to lower yourself and attack a junior, like me, just for a failure of a disciple? Mingdong yelled at the Azure Pung King fearlessly. He showed no respect at all. How dare you? The Azure Pung King bellowed out. His face paled in anger when an ant-like junior argued against him before everyone. Suddenly he exploded with azure light, which condensed into a huge wing. Like a blade, the wing shot forwards with terrifying, devastating power. Naturally, he was using the wing condensed from azure light against the eighth majesty who blocked his way. Under everyone's watch, he was naturally not bold enough to truly injure the eighth majesty. As a result, the wing was only meant to keep the eighth majesty busy. The method to kill Mingdong originated from the wing. It was a feather completely condensed from azure light. It was a feather, but it also seemed like a scale. It ripped through space along the way, shooting towards Mingdong with lightning speed. Azure Pung King, don't you dare! The eighth majesty called out. Her voice was no longer gentle, filled with viciousness and killing intent. She was powerless to stop the feather that shot towards Mingdong. She could only watch it approach him with unbelievable speed. However, at this moment, the space around Mingdong suddenly distorted. The feather from the Azure Pung King came to a halt when it came in contact with the distorted space around Mingdong. It had been forcefully stopped. Afterwards, the distorted space suddenly cracked open, and a white, slender hand extended out. It pressed towards the Azure Pung King gently with a palm strike. Immediately, space shook heavily, and all the laws in the surroundings were affected, having been thrown into disarray. The seemingly simple palm strike happened to have the terrifying power of being able to rip worlds apart. It impacted all the laws in the surroundings. Chapter 2174. Invincible. Time seemed to come to a standstill. The entire universe seemed to have fallen silent. The hand that extended from the spatial crack became the only thing in the world, affecting the minds of everybody. At this moment, all the primordial realm experts gathered there. Felt like the palm strike with supreme might had sucked away their minds, imprinting the power of the strike within their heads. Whether it was infinite primes or chaotic primes, they were all affected. In the distance, the solitary sword ancestor who sat on a meteor with a sword on his back suddenly stood up. He stared at the palm strike extremely sternly as all the hairs on him pricked up. So powerful. She is one of the greatest experts below Grand Prime after all. She really is terrifying, the solitary sword ancestor thought. He felt helpless before the palm strike even with his strength. Even the onlooking solitary sword ancestor experienced such intense emotions, so the Azure Pung King who directly faced the palm strike was even more shocked. Against the gentle strike that shot over with lightning speed, he felt like he faced heavens, the tremendous, vast, indomitable heavens. He felt insignificant and powerless before it, where he could not put up any resistance at all. The laws within the palm strike were far too powerful. It directly impacted the Azure Pung King's mind, causing him to feel like fate wanted to claim his life, and there was nothing he could do about it. However, the Azure Pung King was still an infamous peak expert of the Saints' world. Azure light exploded in his eyes, and he suppressed the shock within him. As he roared out, a pulse of terrifying energy immediately shot out like a raging flood. He had struck out with his own power of laws. Immediately, the space there collapsed. The Azure Pung King's strike was just too powerful. His full-powered strike without holding anything back was so terrifying that just devastating was not enough to describe its power. All the space as far as the eye could see collapsed from the Azure Pung King's attack, reduced to darkness. Many primordial realm experts and god kings were unable to escape in time, so they became unrelated casualties, sucked away by the Azure Pung King's spatial cracks. Since you want to attack me, you need to pay the consequences. If these people die here, it'll all be because of you. The Azure Pung King roared inside as madness filled his eyes. He did not do this on purpose. His opponent was just too powerful, so he needed to unleash his full strength and hide no power. As a result, the surrounding space collapsed from the energy he had erupted with. The slender hand that had emerged from the spatial crack was completely unaffected by the Azure Pung King's pulse of energy. The gentle-looking hand contained a mysterious power of supremacy. Wherever the hand passed by, the stream of energy from the Azure Pung King would split in half and expand towards the two sides. At that critical moment, the slender hand was unstoppable, landing on the Azure Pung King's chest gently. Spurt. The Azure Pung King immediately paled as blood sprayed out from his mouth. His chest had been completely destroyed, revealing a huge hole as azure scales shot out everywhere. It scattered across space with the Azure Pung King's blood. The Azure Pung King staggered backwards. He stared at the hand from the spatial crack in shock and fear. There was raging fury within his fearful gaze. Without any hesitation, he turned around and fled. He unleashed his full speed, covering millions of kilometers in a single instance, fleeing into the depths of space. He was unbelievably fast. Azure Pung King, the people of the heavenly palace of Bishing cannot be touched by you. I'll teach you a lesson this time. There won't be a second time. A cold voice rang out in the space there. The voice surpassed time and space, reaching the Azure Pung King who had already vanished, booming out in his head clearly. The mysterious expert who dealt the sneak attack did not chase him. Her hand that had basically pierced through the fabric of space, and time suddenly shone with dazzling light. As threads, the light plunged into the cracks. It wrapped and pulled out the cultivators who were not powerful enough to escape by themselves from the cracks. In the end, the hand brushed past the space there. With that, the shattered space suddenly began to recover at a much greater rate, returning to its previous state in just a few seconds. Very soon, peace descended on that region of space again. The hand had vanished silently at a certain time, only leaving behind Mingdong and the Eighth Majesty who stood there unscathed. Even though they were the closest to the Azure Pung King and were located in the center of the energy storm, they surprisingly were not harmed at all. The primordial realm experts and the god kings in the area were all scattered through the surroundings in horrible shapes. When they thought about what had just happened, they became filled with lingering fear. The solitary sword Ancestor remained standing on the meteor. When the Azure Pung King struck out earlier, the terrifying energy he had erupted with had already reduced all the meteors in the surroundings to dust. Only the meteor beneath the solitary sword Ancestor remained fine, without moving at all. At this moment, the solitary sword Ancestor's ancient eyes landed on Mingdong. He secretly guessed at Mingdong's identity. Mingdong is probably far beyond us in terms of status. In the distance, Rui Di and Ji Yi, who were also in horrible shape, stared at Mingdong with mixed feelings. The First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing only left the Neptunian Divine Palace recently. However, with her speed, she would have already reached an extremely distant region of space by now. Yet because of Mingdong, she ripped through space and intervened. It looks like Mingdong's status is quite impressive in the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. He's either the Eighth Majesty's disciple, or the First Majesty's disciple. Remember, we can never afford to offend this person. Elder Rueda of the sect of dragons and phoenixes appeared beside Ruedi and Ji Yi as he warned them sternly. I never thought that you actually came from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. To another side, Princess Yun Xiaoyan of the Thousand Lotus Empire stood with an extremely mixed expression. Although I knew you had extraordinary origins, I never thought you actually came from a place as great as the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. The difference in our statuses is actually this great. Yun Xiaoyan was gloomy. She was in low spirits. Look at you. Look at what you've become. It's just a trip to the Neptunian Divine Palace. Yet you've lost half your life. You sure embarrass us, the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. At the same time, the Eighth Majesty frowned and lectured Mingdong unhappily. Then she glanced at Yun Xiaoyan in the distance and said to Mingdong, "Let me take you to see someone. Your karma with her runs deep." Chapter 2175. Running into a disaster. The vast outer space was filled with infinite darkness and coldness. There was no sense of time or direction. It was very easy for people to get lost. Currently, in the deathly silent outer space, a small spaceship moved through there silently like a ghost. It was extremely fast. A young man who only seemed to be in his 20s with a weather-hardened face, and a young woman who seemed about the same age as him silently stood in the cockpit. They stared at the space outside. "Jianchen, where are we going next?" At this moment, the woman asked. She blankly stared at the seemingly unfamiliar space that still gave off a sense of familiarity for some reason, as she seemed lost about the future. "We don't have any star charts, and we don't know where we are right now. The priority is for us to learn where we are before taking action. After all, the vast outer space isn't as tranquil as it seems on the surface. In order to avoid the space beasts that thrive here, we need to be careful to not set foot in zones of danger," said the man as he stared at the outside world. They happened to be Jianchen and Kaya. After the teleportation formation sent out Jianchen and Shui Yunlan, they arrived in this unfamiliar space. Shui Yunlan did not travel with Jianchen. She turned down his suggestion of visiting Changyang Mingyue and left alone. Afterwards, Jianchen called Kaya out from the Anata Tower. Inside a space ring he had obtained from a supreme god king in the Neptunian Divine Palace, he found a small spaceship. As a result, the two of them used it to travel through outer space. The only problem was that they had searched through all the space rings on them, and actually found two small spaceships, but they did not find a single star chart. As a result, they were lost in outer space. They could only control the spaceship to fly in one direction in hopes of coming across someone who also hurried through outer space, so that they could ask for directions. "It's just a pity that Chanlong has gone missing," Kaya sighed gently. When she thought about the days when the three of them roamed through outer space, She became filled with pity. "Don't worry, he'll be fine. You have to remember that the Neptunian mountains vanished with him," said Jianchen. However, at this moment, both of their faces changed slightly. Outside, the space that used to be filled with stars completely vanished. The space they now saw was truly empty. There was only eternal darkness and no starlight at all. "Is this a formation?" Jianchen studied the surroundings as he said sternly. It went without thinking that the formation was very powerful, seeing how it was cast in outer space. However, Jianchen did not have any mastery over formations at all. So once they were trapped here, they would be in trouble. With a flash, Jianchen and Kaiyu appeared on the deck outside. The two of them stared at the surroundings sternly. "We have indeed entered a formation. It's just that this formation is extremely tremendous and profound. It's a pity that Chanlong is not present, or we might have been able to find a way out with his mastery over formations," Kaiyu said grimly. Neither she nor Jianchen was skilled with formations, so the situation they faced was extremely bad. "Come with me. Let's see if we can leave here somehow." Jianchen grabbed Kaiyu's hand and retreated in the direction that they had come from. However, leaving a formation was easier said than done. Moreover, they had no mastery over formations at all. As a result, just a while later, Jianchen felt like he had completely lost his bearings. He was truly lost. At this moment, a powerful pulse of energy radiated out. Finger-sized streams of dark light suddenly appeared, wrapping towards Jianchen and Kaiyu with terrifying killing intent like rain. The light came in from all directions, completely sealing off all of Jianchen and Kaiyu's paths of retreat. The power that each stream of light gave off made Jianchen jump in fright. So many streams together possessed enough power to even kill primordial realm experts. "Quick, enter the tower," Jianchen called out and took out the Inata tower as quickly as he could. With a flash, the two of them hid inside. Boom, 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 boom. The streaks of light all struck the Inata tower, producing a series of deafening sounds. It also caused the Inata tower to shake. Under the havoc of the powerful ripples of energy, the spaceship parked nearby that had not been stowed away instantly shattered to pieces. Without any hesitation, Jianchen immediately controlled the Inata tower to charge out. He hoped that he could charge out of this formation with the toughness of the Inata tower. "I wonder if the owner of this formation is present. If they are, then we have to leave immediately, or there'll be big trouble. I've obtained 3 cosmic movement talismans in the Neptunian Divine Palace, and I only have one left now. I don't want to waste it here," Jianchen thought as he flew as quickly as he could with the Inata tower. The Inata tower endured the most vicious attacks from the formation as it charged through it all. Even though it was still damaged and sealed up by sword chi, preventing it from unleashing its full power, it was still a god artifact of the best quality after all. Just the material it had been built out of was indestructible. As a result, even though the attacks of the formation were extremely ferocious, it failed to do anything to the Inata tower. Boom. At this moment, a great sound rang out. The Inata tower struck a spatial barrier and shattered a meteor in there. As the meteor shattered, a crack seemed to appear in the formation as well. "Stop! Don't destroy the formation!" At this moment, a hoarse, old voice boomed out thunderously. In the next moment, a huge hand completely condensed out of energy reached over with great might, grabbing the Inata tower and pulling it over. Jianchen's face changed drastically in the Inata tower. Wrapped around by the giant hand, he was unable to escape with the Inata tower. After all, his control over the Inata tower was still very weak. He was unable to unleash all the power of the tower. Jianchen's face became extremely ugly as he sighed at his misfortune. He had already realized that he had probably encountered a primordial realm expert, and a very powerful one at that. Boom. The huge hand condensed from energy directly through the Inata tower at a meteor hidden within the formation. With a rumble, a huge pit was created in the tough meteor as a result of the Inata tower's terrifying toughness. "I know you can hear me. Come out. Don't hide inside." The hoarse old voice rang out again. Even though it was unable to reach within the Inata tower, Jianchen was still able to hear it clearly, as he had refined half of the tower. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.